Helpfully color-coordinated power UPS. What the fuck did you do? Tsunade screamed. I didn't do anything. Orochimaru screamed back louder. What, so you're saying that she pointed at Naruto and Sasuke? They were still glowing purple and gold. Just happened? What, you think that in the middle of all this Orochimaru stopped, looked down again. Wait. Shut up. Oh, now you're trying to tell me to shut up. Orochimaru snapped, crouching down next to the pair. Look. Tsunade did. And frowned. She certainly didn't have the chakra vision that came with certain dojutsu, and she wasn't about to interfere with whatever the hell was happening by sticking her own hands into the mix. But she could see that the two colors were spreading. Gold sliding across onto Sasuke, and purple beginning to cover Naruto. I'm aware I'm judging this from the most layman perspective possible. Orochimaru said. But are their chakras mixing? Tsunade finished. I think so. Sasuke tried to process what he was being told. So, you and your brother murdered God? Next to him, Naruto seemed less skeptical and more absolutely ecstatic. Well, sort of. Hagoromo admitted to them. We couldn't kill Kaguya. Could barely beat her. The only option for dealing with her permanently was sealing her away, but the issue we faced was where. You've witnessed that the more powerful a being you attempt to seal, the more difficult it is. A scroll wasn't going to cut it. You could have tried to put her in the Reaper? Sasuke suggested. Wait, hold on, how does the Reaper and the afterlife fit into all this? I have literally no idea. Hagoromo admitted. As in, I haven't the foggiest how that relates to any of this. I don't even know how the Uzumaki came up with all that. It's a little concerning. Oh. But, well, without literally summoning death itself, there were only two possible hosts to seal the 10 tails into. Hagoromo sighed. And Himura called not at first. You became the Jinchuriki of the 10 tails? Sasuke's mouth fell open. You were strong enough to fight the 10 tails, and then you became the Jinchuriki of the 10 tails? Naruto was now looking suitably horrified. Sasuke, where did you put the increase estimated threat level button? I need it. Hagoromo rolled his eyes, sort of. It was hard to tell with the Rinnegan. Relax, I'm dead now. I'm not much of a fighter anymore. Indeed, as I grew old and my body began to fail, I knew that I could not allow the monster within me to ravage the world again. I also did not desire to force another to bear the burden I had, for carrying that thing in my mind for so long was taxing. So I had an idea. He waved a hand at Sasuke, who still had Samahata slung over his back. Hello dear, by the way. Hello darling, spoke the sword, causing Naruto to scream and jump about 10 feet away. It's been too long. It has. Hagoromo replied, smiling. Are my descendants treating you well? Varies from person to person. This latest one is a strapping young man, I'm sure he'll do great things. Naruto pointed a shaking finger at it. Sasuke, has your sword always done that? Yeah, probably should have brought it up. I try to ignore it. Sasuke admitted sheepishly. Hey! With Samahata, some other tools, and the creation of all things technique, I was able to split the 10 tails. Hagoromo explained. The result was the 9-tailed beasts. Okay, yeah, question. Naruto interrupted, holding a hand up. I've wanted this answered for bloody years. The beasts have different power levels based on their tails, right? Hagoromo winced, likely realizing where this was going. Yep. Why the hell is it exponential? Naruto practically screamed. Why is it 1 through 9 tails if the thing has 10? Why isn't 1 tail's worth consistent from beast to beast? Why it was an accident? Hagoromo shouted back. Okay? There, I said it. He slumped, groaning. I'm sorry if the time when I split a mad god into separate sentient beings wasn't done cleanly enough for you. I had a big bloody monster that I just let out of myself and I only knew one spell that carved a certain chunk of it, so I just did that. Over and over again. Ashura and Indra were snickering at him and he glared at them. Shut it. But yes, Kurama was about 40% of the Ten Tails? I think? And then when the Ten Tails was still alive I just did it again. Gyuki was 40% of what was left, then Chome was about 40% of what was left after that, you get the idea. Eventually, I cut Shikaku off and the remainder, what you call the Gedomazo, stopped moving. And then I stuck it in Himura's basement and swore him to secrecy about the whole thing. You should have seen it. Samahata laughed. It was just him swinging me up and down in a panic for almost 40 minutes. I don't think he stopped screaming for the entire time. Hagoromo turned around and started sulking. Indra and Ashura were in stitches laughing. Naruto and Sasuke exchanged a glance. So he's an idiot. Sasuke summarized. Would you expect anything else from our grandpa? Naruto replied, giggling. Got enough of this shit from Himura, fucking horse crap, Hagoromo grumbled. Anyway, Bijou. They exist. But what the Rinnegan can do, the Rinnegan can undo. What was split apart can be put back together again. I doubt I need to explain to you why you need to stop this Madara fellow, because my brother has terrible taste in men. Ashura sniggered, still stood to one side. Fuck you. Indra scowled, blushing. I'm getting there. Hagoromo told them, shooting an irritated look. You're taking too long, Dad. Ashura complained. There's a lot to get to. Just do the bloodline bit, the mixy bit, and then let them out. Damn kids these days. No appreciation for a good exposition delivery, Hagoromo huffed, and turned back to Naruto and Sasuke, who were trying not to laugh. Anyway. Myself and Himura both had children, and following the same pattern as us and Kagaya, those children's powers were diluted. My two sons were Indra and Ashura here. The former wielded the Sharingan and a bunch of other stuff, while the latter wielded would release and a bunch of other stuff. And as their descendants in turn spread through the world and Fuyuoked. Ashura said, very loudly, before Indra grabbed him and hip threw him onto the floor. Thank you, son. Yes, that. The bloodlines spread further. Merged, separated, and merged again until we were left with what we have today. All leading to you too, and what is currently happening to you. Right. Naruto nodded. What is happening exactly? Sasuke-kun has put himself inside of you. Ashura shouted, before gargling as Indra grabbed him by the throat. The pair continued to grapple on the floor. Naruto gave Sasuke a questioning look, and Uchiha coughed and shifted in place. I shared my chakra with you to try and make you not die. It worked? Oh, it did more than work. Indra told him, arms wrapped around his brother's throat. You weren't just sharing chakra with your friend. You were merging the chakra of the descendants of me and my brother. You were recreating the chakra of the Sage of Six Paths. Sasuke and Naruto looked at each other in shock. There was a twist, and Ashura broke his brother's hold, then flipped him onto the bottom, saying chakra is a tool that brings people together. In this case, you. Your bodies have some of the DNA of Pops in you, the DNA of Kagaya. And now that you've come together, it's remembering. Get off! Indra snarled. Ashura did, and the pair stood up, straightening. But not without us. Ashura continued. I mean, maybe if you two had a kid, we're both dudes. Then they might be the most powerful ninja born in millennia. But since we're doing this in the external way rather than the inherited, Ashura grinned. Your bodies will need reminding. Nothing too special happens without our assistance. Indra grimaced. Which I really shouldn't have given to Madara, he just demonstrated a very impressive resolve. Because obviously, if the Rinnegan had appeared every time our descendants got touchy-feely, Black Zetsu would have had a far easier time of it all. Wait. Sasuke held up a hand. Did you just say Rinnegan? The two brothers looked at each other. Smirked. Tell me, kiddos. Ashura said eventually. What would you say to some brand new high-risk superpowers? In the wasteland of the Fourth Great Shinobi War, there was a moment where everyone seemed to hold their breath. The amassed armies of shinobi didn't really know what to do. Tsunade and Orochimaru were quietly panicking over Sasuke and Naruto's bodies. The Kage were recovering from the second time in as many hours that someone had tried to kill them all with a giant blue sword. Madara stood atop the flailing, shuddering 10 tails, arms crossed, impatiently tapping his foot at a rapid pace. And Might Guy stood over Hinata, fist not a centimeter from her head. Which meant, strangely enough, that it wasn't currently buried inside it. Hinata reopened her eyes, and looked up in shock. The expression on Might Guy's face was one that would stay with her for the rest of her life, however long that came to be. His teeth were clenched, pupils practically invisible, skin ash black and hair glowing red. The sheer visceral tension in his body was unmistakable. Hinata could practically feel it, as he slowly opened his mouth. For everything that was happening, his voice was actually quite quiet. No. He uttered. The fist began to pull back. Excuse me? Black Zetsu sounded just plain surprised. What the hell do you think? Your guy's other arm pulled back, began to thrust forwards, stopped, just like the other one. Guy straightened, allowing Hinata to scramble back across the stone. His whole body was shaking, Hinata could see blood vessels bursting everywhere, and the gate of death was reaching its namesake. The sheer agony Guy must have been and didn't even bear thinking about. Nonetheless, he took a step backwards. What? Zetsu was panicking now, only blackness squirming across the surface of Guy's body. This isn't possible. No mere human can resist the true shadow possession. I am chakra. I'm controlling every mode of energy in your body. But the 8 gates don't use chakra, Hinata breathed. She clambered shakily to her feet. You made one critical error. Guy said, as he pulled both his arms out to either side. There is no shadow that can douse the fires of youth. He forced himself down onto one knee and looked up at Hinata, torso and throat bared. My student! He shouted. Look down the paths of the consequences of defeat, and see that the world will suffer for it. Muster your resolve. Do what you have to do. Hinata grimaced, fists clenching to either side of her. But she sure as hell wasn't going to ruin this moment for him. A blue flame engulfed her, the Tensiken cloak having finally had enough time to replenish itself. This cannot be! Shrieked Black Zetsu. I have forced the kindest of men to slaughter their own families. I have swung the sword arm of Indra himself. I cannot be foiled by some beast in a jumpsuit. This is impossible. Rule 1 of the ninja world. Hinata told him, eyes hard. The universe does not care what you believe to be impossible. She bared her own teeth in a feral smile. Especially not when it's being done by a man with the heart of a lion and everything to lose. Her gaze softened as she looked at the more human part of her target's face. Guy-sensei? It has been an absolute pleasure. Konoha's green beast smiled. Likewise. Tell Kakashi that he is my greatest friend, and lead that I love him like my own son. Now strike. Hinata struck. Black Zetsu was fast in his attempt to flee Guy's body, but Hinata was faster. She blitzed forwards and grabbed Guy, one hand on his head and the other on his heart, and counter chakra blazed into intensity around her fingers. She didn't want to risk what might or might not kill the wretched parasite, so resorted to the most certain method of dealing with it she could think of. Namely, powering her lion fists up the wazoo. Your chakra, huh? Thanks for letting me know. The monster's screams reached a fever pitch, then distorted and split, as the shadows were inexorably pulled off Guy's body and consumed in flame. Hinata didn't kill Black Zetsu. She absorbed him. The process ended with a flash, and Hinata staggered forwards, barely able to catch herself, never mind Guy. Still, she did so, lowering him to the floor. She had hoped, but, no, his heart was no longer beating. His entire body had been cooked from the inside out, cracks in his skin revealing hot orange glows that wisps of steam lazily twirled up from. His eyes were rolled back into his forehead, and his body was still. Hinata sighed and laid him down. "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen," she told him, "you absolute fucking legend." Guy did not reply, and if one corner of his mouth had twitched upwards, then she would have convinced herself that she was imagining it. Taking a second to think, she found that she could still hear some stray thoughts that most certainly weren't hers in her head. Black Zetsu was still there, inside her now, annoyingly, which might become a problem in the future. For now though, he was dealt with. Which just left, for the record. She called out, floating up again and turning to Madara, "If there exists a physical limit on how pissed off someone can be at a person, then I've hit that with you. Like I've reached that point. I'm as pissed at you as I once was with Neji, and that's saying something. I don't know who that is, and I don't care," he announced, as she closed the distance between them. "Yeah, figures." She chuckled. A few of Zetsu's scattered thoughts came to her, and she went, "Huh. Hey, you know the Shadow Man was planning to betray you, right?" "Oh, he was?" Madara paused, seeming to think about it. "Yeah, figures. I knew he had something up his sleeve, but wasn't sure how he planned to do it." He sighed and stretched. "And once again you fall victim to the error that plagued so many of my opponents before you, not taking the time to think your actions through. One of our last enemies is dealt with." Hinata reviewed, "I'm still at full strength and you're all alone now." "Oh, is that how you see it?" Madara smiled a hunter's smile. "Look at it from my perspective. Two of the only people who could threaten me are now dead. I didn't have to lift a finger, and it's wasted more than enough of your time." Beneath him, the mature Ten Tails opened its mouth and roared. Madara put his hands together. "Six path shit." Hinata blasted towards him Ten Tails' coffin seal. The blank white world rumbled around its occupants. Indra and Ashura both looked up at the same time, staring at, apparently, nothing. They both simultaneously said fuck. "What? What happened?" Naruto asked. "The Ten Tails has a new host," Hagoromo said, gravely. "Told you were taking too long," Ashura complained. "Then let's not delay further by arguing." Hagoromo swept his hand through the air, forestalling further complaints. "Naruto. Sasuke. Your time has come. Are you prepared? Go out and fight Madara? We've been doing that all fucking day." Sasuke shrugged, trying to hide the fact that Madara Uchiha with the power of the Ten Tails scared him beyond the capacity for rational thought. "But if you have power-ups, we'll take them." "Got it." Ashura walked up. "All right, ninja, time to see what you're really made of. Hands out, do what we do." Ashura and Indra both reached an arm out to each other, touching palms, and stretched their other arm forwards. Naruto and Sasuke mimicked them, Naruto touching Ashura's palm while Sasuke touched Indra's. The four stood in a square, and their bodies all lit up glowing. "One last warning," Hagoromo called to them. "Naruto, what you gain here will allow you to continue to fight, but your chakra channels are still critically broken. You will have to draw on the chakra of your teammates to survive. Well, that's not a long-term solution. How do I fix it?" Naruto shouted back, as the light surrounding the four intensified. "Look within yourself," Hagoromo instructed. "A greater power still lies there. Grasp it, and follow in my footsteps." Naruto blinked. "That's super vague. The world's at stake, can you be more specific?" "Fine," Hagoromo shouted. "What you want to do is," Naruto whited out. Tsunade and Orochimaru both took a step back as the glow around Naruto and Sasuke's bodies pulsed once, then vanished. A full second passed. Then they both opened their eyes. Hinata didn't hesitate for a moment, holding both hands out in front of herself and channeling her chakra outwards. What resulted was, well, basically a giant Kamehameha. A blast of blue energy tore forwards, punching into the cloud of smoke that had been whipped up by Madara's ceiling. She saw it fail. The Shinra Tensei, which was kinda similar to her heavenly spin, now she thought about it, gave Madara a sphere of protection from the beam. With her Tensiken, she saw him idly reach out to the edge of said sphere, touching one hand to the energy, and go as his fingers burned off completely. The Shinra Tensei was only a brief reprieve, and Hinata was maintaining the pressure on the energy beam, but Madara had much more up his sleeve for when it ran out. 10 black orbs floated around his back, and 3 of them swung round in front of him, merging together into a shield that had no problem holding her attack at bay. The fingers on his hand regenerated while he was doing so. Hinata TCHD and gave up on the blast, flying in with energy curling about her hands. When she finally got close enough to get a good look at him, yeah, that was about what she'd expected, really. Madara's hair was white, and his skin was pale. His 2 Rinnegan gleamed, and worse, there was this strange fold in his forehead around which chakra swirled intensely. A truth-seeking orb morphed into a black war fan, which he swung up at her, even as she pivoted in midair and brought one fist down. The resulting explosion sent pieces of the landscape flying away around them. Neither of their arms gave. So I can't absorb or nullify your strange Tensiken chakra. He mused. But then again, you can't do the same to mine, thank you. I'll keep that in mind. Limbo. A hand grabbed her leg. It was only able to catch her by surprise because it had appeared out of nowhere. This ethereal clone of Madara had just poofed into existence and grabbed her. What level of bullshit is this? She disengaged from the real Madara and brought her wings around, skewering the duplicate below its ribs on both sides of its torso. She backflipped in midair, kicked away a fan swing from Madara and hurled the clone away, then all the fucking truth-seeking orbs at once were coming at her. She pulled her wings up to block 6, OW, and caught one in each of her arms. Vishnu, remember? 4. Oh yeah, also OW, which naturally put Madara in the perfect position to pull his fist back and punch her in the stomach. Guy hits way harder than you, was her first thought, but the attack was still more than enough to tear away her Tensiken cloak and send her plummeting back to the ground. She coughed, on her knees, and slowly stood back up. Okay, this power-up is super annoying, she groused. It ditches you faster than Ino when she realizes you're a romantic rival. Okay, well, that one was a little harsh. Madara seemed to give absolutely zero fucks about her cloak, instead offering her a confused look. You can see the limbo clones? Hinata blinked, looked, and finally paid closer attention to the ethereal doppelganger that was currently stood on the floor in front of him, in a defensive posture. Now that he mentioned it, she couldn't actually see it, given that there wasn't anything there. There was a brief moment of whiplash where she tried to actually bother interpreting what the Tensiken was telling her. A greater dojutsu than your ancestors have held for generations, and you're letting it run on autopilot. Good job. It was the forces, she realized after a moment. She could see forces now. There was pressure, a place where the air wasn't, in the shape of a Madara. Nothing was contained there, it was like the force was being exerted from somewhere else. But he referred to them as clones, so he wasn't just using the Deva Path's telekinesis to create a force zone. None of that was what she said, though. When he said you can see the limbo clones, what she said was what, like it's hard? He raised an eyebrow at that. Says the girl with the second best dojutsu in existence. She shrugged, using all the time he was wasting to try and recharge her TCM. First of all, that's a pretty bold claim. The Tensikens meant to be equal to the Rinnegan. I wasn't saying the Rinnegan was first. He smirked. Huh. Well, I'll unpack that later. And second, I'd also be able to see them if I don't know, splattered them with paint? Tossed a cloud of chalk dust in the air? Naruto could have worked your secret out in his first year of the academy. Madara shrugged. Odd, then, that it's what I used to kill him. Her temper flared, as did her chakra, as the Tensiken cloak reasserted itself. Prick. And why in the hell did you just spend a full, real-time second allowing me to hey maybe it's that thing you literally told us about with the thinking about our actions? Hinata stopped laser focusing her Tensiken on Madara and his clone, instead resorting to a more standard use your Byakugan to look everywhere viewpoint. And then she realized. Oh, right, got it. Think your actions through. See, I'm learning. And then the ground beneath her exploded. She leapt up as giant roots tore up from the stone, then down again, digging in deep and away, and an enormous tree trunk erupted from the ground behind Madara. It was the biggest thing she'd ever seen, almost as wide as the 10 tails and quickly growing much taller than it. What in the ever-loving Hinata breathed? The Shinju tree. Madara helpfully informed her. If it finishes growing, I win instantly. Right. Got it. She started flying towards him again. Madara's Rinnegan flashed and the Limbo clone was joined by 3 more, all of whom moved to intercept her. One punch was enough to let her know they were weaker than he was, thank Kami, but considering that he was definitely on a level above her, she struck one, knocking it back, parried 2 more with her wings and kneed another in the chest, then axed her leg down and slammed its head into the floor. 2 anchored themselves to the floor with chakra, effectively holding her in place, while the one she'd knocked away was blowing a giant fireball at her. They can use jutsu? Good to know. She yanked up the one she'd knocked into the floor and threw it into the oncoming fire, resulting in an explosion that at the very least wasn't on her, and then she channeled lightning chakra out through her wings into her oppressor's hands. That didn't seem to do anything though, so she threw a little adamantine energy into the mix, and that got them to unhand her, the force vanishing from her wings as their physical forms seemed to flicker slightly under its effects. She span around into a jump and kicked one in the head with the same energy, causing said head to disintegrate, before turning to the other and peppering its body with palm strikes. By that point, the fiery pair were back upon her, and the others were reconstituting even as she watched. Oh, for goodness sake, they're like the Edos, and they're wasting my time to try out the rest of her skill set. Specifically, the telekinetic aspects. She reached out to either side and pushed, and an omnidirectional wave of force spread outwards, tearing up the rubble around her and forcing the Limbo clones away. Bootleg Shinra Tensei achieved. She took off again, towards the tree, and the damn clones followed, substituting or body flickering out in front of her and bombarding her with long-ranged fire attacks. She dodged what she could, shrugging off the rest. Finally the TCM's chakra countering properties were helping her for once, and maybe if she just used the griffin as a regular attack she'd be able to blow the damn tree in half, because it was growing fast, the blood-red flower bud at its top stretching higher and higher into the sky. She began making the hand seals on the fly, then was forced to stop and throw herself left as a giant sword sliced through the air she'd once occupied. She turned back and glared. The Limbo clones can make their own Susanoo? She bitched, seeing Madara chuckle through her Tensiken, before charging up another crystal Chidori and slamming it into the fist that was coming at her from one of the 4 blue titans. They weren't as ungodly tall as Madara's personal Susanoo was, but they were still massive, and though her attack shredded the entire arm of the aggressor, she was quickly reminded of an important fact: you can't use sticky shoes to cheat conservation of momentum when you're flying. She was sent careening backwards through the air, and before she could recover, another of the Susanoo grabbed her completely in its palm and swung her around, making to slam her into the floor. She made use of the good old firecracker in the hand technique to blow the fist apart midway through, and was able to land hard on her feet, knees bending into a squat from the sheer GS she was tanking. Grimacing with closed eyes, she waved one hand in response to an incoming swing, manipulating force to make the giant sword of one of the attackers just barely miss her, stabbing into the floor less than a meter to her right. Immediately after, the other 3 all made simultaneously to do the same thing. She exhaled, held her arms out, felt and saw and pushed. The swings never landed. Around her, stone began to levitate upwards into the air. The Susanoo did the same, the blanket field of force she was exerting simply dragging everything upwards, because try sticking to the floor when you're floating inside a big blue robot, fuckers. For a brief moment, she realized that she was basically a Jedi, and that Naruto and Sasuke were going to be pissed when they found out. The Limbo clones had a solution, however. The blades in their hands all flashed with blue fire and transformed into bows, with which they quickly took aim. Come on! Abandoning any further herbicidal plans, Hinata swept her arms around in a circle, shouting heavenly spin. The dome of swirling force was amplified by the Tensiken's power. All 4 Susanoo arrows streaked through the air towards her, and clattered off her defense like so many matchsticks. But now they had just dropped back to the floor and were reloading, and she just wanted them out of the way. Ngah. She channeled as much power as she could into the dome, spinning faster and faster, forcing it to expand outwards. Outwards it went. The dome increased from 10 meters in radius to 20, 50, 100, more. The limbo clones were caught up in it and forced outwards, the giant blue avatars sent tumbling away across the landscape. The dome dispersed, and Hinata didn't waste a single moment catching her breath. She started making the hand seals for the griffin again, turning back to the Shinju tree to see Madara right there, the real version of him flying rapidly towards her with a spear made of truth-seeking orbs outstretched. She fired off the griffin, the giant electrical lionel blasting out towards Madara, who simply threw his spear. It obliterated her attack on contact, because of course it did, and she desperately beat her wings to try and get out of the way even though a quick maths check told her that there was no way she would be able to. In the end, though, she needn't have bothered. There was a flash, and a stone in front of her suddenly wasn't a stone. Instead, appearing in its place, "Sorry we were so late." Sasuke Uchiha grinned back at her. Gone were his usual dark eyes, or even his red Mangekyo. Instead, both orbs were purple, with concentric circles spreading out from the center. "We got lost on the road of life." His right arm was extended outwards. Grasping that arm, turning back, Naruto flashed her a smile as well. His appearance was, seemingly, totally unchanged. "But come on. Like we were going to miss this?" The spear was still flying towards them, but Naruto held out his free hand and caught the tip of it. The black energy seemed to flow around his arm like water, the densest chakra Hinata had ever seen changing itself at Naruto's command. He directed it in a circle around the three of them before throwing it back at its sender. The energy reformed itself into orbs, then returned to the set of 10 floating around Madara's back. Madara, who was now looking much less cocky than he had a few moments ago. Naruto closed his eyes and focused. Slowly, space warping around them, truth-seeking orbs began to grow into existence around him, spawning in the air from seemingly nothing. He was able to make 6 before visibly sagging, taking deep breaths. "Easy," Sasuke warned, putting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We don't have your nigh infinite supplies of chakra anymore. Don't, worry." Naruto shook his head and looked up, eyes hard. "I'll make these last." Hinata was still looking between them in shock. You're alive?" "Last I checked." Naruto smirked in a way that was significantly hotter than it had any right to be. "And you?" Hinata stopped. Pointed at Sasuke. "You have the Rinnegan." "Yup." Sasuke nodded. "He did. 2 of them." "And you?" She pointed back at Naruto. "You have yin-yang release?" "I think so." He looked her up and down. "What did you get?" "Tensegan." She answered, shrugging. "Long story." "Yeah, I bet. Did you have to talk to a ghost for yours?" "Yes, actually." Hinata sighed. "Life is weird, recently." "Yeah, no shit." Sasuke snorted. "Case in point, there's a giant tree over there that's literally just stopped growing." Hinata blinked. Then coughed. "Ah. We weren't supposed to let it do that." The trio turned. Madara didn't seem to be paying them much attention anymore. He was looking up at the moon, head craned back, arms crossed. Above him, the Shinju tree loomed. The red flower at its top had unfolded, spinning out into a beautiful crimson bloom. "Lovely night for it, isn't it?" mused the resurrected demigod. "Practically perfect weather. Though to be honest, if clouds had been able to stop this, it would have been rather embarrassing, wouldn't it?" He looked back down at them, and they all took an involuntary step backwards. The fold on his forehead had opened. There, right in the center, was another eye. It was blood red, and though it bore the circles of the Rinnegan, it also contained Sharingan Tomo. 9 of them. Rinne Sharingan. Sasuke breathed. Naruto gulped. In case you weren't caught up with all the lore, Hinata? He's basically God now. Basically. Madara agreed. He sighed. From the bottom of my heart, children, and for your own sakes, I genuinely hope that you don't find a way out of this. And Hinata knew that he was telling the truth. Stop him. She breathed. All three of them charged. Madara looked back to the sky. I call upon the Jubi, the Shinju tree, as he who has fed upon its fruit and made himself one with its power. Spread thine roots across the world, and touch the bodies, hearts, minds and souls of all those who dwell there. I bid thee, bring to the world the sleep that has no end. Team 7 converged upon Madara's location. They were nowhere near fast enough. May the world sleep. May the world dream. Madara closed his two normal eyes, leaving the Rinne Sharingan alone in his head. I cast the infinite Tsukuyomi. And so the moon bled. Interlude Dreams. Tonari Otsutsuki held Hanabi's hand very tightly in his own. The young girl looked up at him and quietly asked Tonari? What's happening? Tonari wasn't sure what to say. The two of them stood on the surface of the moon, looking out and upwards at the surface of the earth above them. It was a beautiful view, one he had longed to show Hanabi for years now, and with his new, old, eyes wow. What he could see through the puppets didn't do it justice. But there was something wrong with the image. In the terrain that he had long since memorized as the center of the ninja world, which at this point should be totally dark as it faced away from the sun, there was a single bright red spot. And perhaps more obviously, the terrain around him was glowing blood red. I don't know. He gulped. But I think we might regret losing the ability to drop the moon on them. Hakuyuki dreamed. He dreamed he was in Konoha, and he was loved. Sai, Naruto, Sasuke, Gaara, Sakura, everyone loved him, and he was never alone. Zabuza was there, having survived, and he was the Mizukage, though of course, Mei was still alive. She loved Haku too. Naruto achieved his dream of becoming the Hokage, and Haku stood at his side as he brought peace to the ninja world. Haku, of course, had never had any such aspirations to power. He was simply happy that when he went home, there were people there waiting for him. Sometimes, however, he did get this small, disconcerting feeling in the back of his mind. A certain guilt. For he had never truly earned the love of all his peers. Their feelings were genuine, honest, and true, but Haku couldn't help but sometimes wonder why. All their lives were perfect, what had he done to make them care for him so? Sometimes, when he was feeling his worst, he would ask. And while their reassurances as to his many lovable qualities certainly felt nice to hear, they always seemed empty. Hollow. Whenever he felt this way, Haku just took those he loved and held them all the tighter. Konan dreamed. In her dream, she had been strong enough to save Yahiko, way back when. Her, Yahiko and Nagato rose into their power and tore down Mangekyo, defeating Hanzo the salamander in a particularly gruesome and satisfying way. They rebuilt their village, and went ahead with their plan to save the world. And people listened. There was no war, no scheming, no Akatsuki. They merely talked, and people understood. The ninja villages laid down their arms and ceased their wars, and the world was at peace. Her child was born healthy and strong, and never knew war or suffering. And there were still many problems she had to busy herself solving, many fights she still had to fight, which she naturally complained about to anyone who would listen. They were her own fault, of course, the dream providing her with them because they were what she wanted. She would never admit it to herself, that in the quiet moments she often found herself wishing for such events. Because without any conflict, she didn't really have anything to do. Shikamaru Nara dreamed. This is a dream, isn't it? He asked, setting a shogi piece down on the board. How could you possibly know that? Shikaku Nara looked at him exasperatedly. Shikamaru just raised an eyebrow. Right, of course. Shikaku sighed. Something, fuck you, I'm Shikamaru, yada yada, right? Something like that. Shikamaru smiled. Though it's probably more that the dream thinks that the only way I'll be happy is if I can unlock some great secret that nobody else can. The pair were sat on the floor of their living room, playing against each other. The sun shone warmly, but not too hot, through the windows, illuminating Shikamaru just the way he liked it. Because of course it was. Now it was his father's turn to raise an eyebrow. I didn't know that you had those kinds of aspirations. My aspirations are to sit down on a comfy bed and do absolutely nothing. Shikamaru corrected him. I just also happen to be incredibly vain. Why do you think I put the effort into screw with Kankuro so much? Showing off is one of the few things I'll actually exert myself to do. It just clashes with my persona to admit it. But you're admitting it to me? You're not real. I can say whatever I want. Fair enough. Shikaka paused, then put a shogi piece down on the board between them. So what's the plan? Try and escape. What for? Shikamaru snorted. There's nothing I can do out there. Doesn't matter how smart I am if Madara can kill me before I can think. He sighed and leaned back, moving another piece. Which, I imagine, is another reason why the dream actually let me figure out I was inside it. It wants to keep me here at all costs, but it knows I won't be bothered to try and leave, so there wasn't any risk. I'll wait for Team 7 to sort it, and if that doesn't work, guess I'm stuck here. Humph. How very like you. Shikaka moved one of his own pieces. So what are you going to do? You're essentially lucid dreaming now, in a world designed to give you whatever you want. Shikamaru looked down at the shogi board. Saw how he could win. Sighed again. Not this. He told his dad. I do want to beat you at shogi, but there's no point if it isn't really you. It's not even a real intellectual challenge, since anything that's set up for me is designed for me to beat it eventually. I could start talking about how I'm proud of you. Shikaku offered. Again, it isn't you. Shikamaru shrugged. So there's an undercurrent of lying to it. He smirked. I'd be tempted to go outside and wait for Temari to show up and seduce me, if I didn't know that it wasn't really her either. Good point. Shikaka twirled a piece between his fingers. What if a bunch of nameless hot ladies came through the door looking for you? Shikamaru waved a hand in a so-so gesture. Maybe later, if I'm in the mood. See, with you, there's a very real chance that means never. His father pointed out. And if I don't want them to, nobody in this world will ever call me out on that. Shikamaru rolled his eyes. My apathy being enabled. This place is perfect for me. Then why do you even want to leave? Shikaku asked, seeming genuinely curious. Shikamaru chuckled, looking out the window. Simple. I have teammates to get back to. Then he flopped onto his back, spreading his arms out. All right, come on, Dreamworld. I'm bored now. You're supposed to be able to keep me here forever, surely you've got something to entertain me? There was a knock at the door. Shikamaru glanced to it as it opened, and a familiar figure bustled in. Sorry I'm late. Called Asuma Sarutobi. I was a bit busy with background details you don't care about. Ino and Choji should be here in a couple minutes. How you doing, Shik? Shikamaru closed his eyes and smiled. Heh. Well played, Dream. Yeah, I'm doing fine, Sensei. How about you? Gaara dreamed. His childhood had been happy, living with his mother and his siblings. None of Suna's people feared him, instead, they were proud of the boy who defended their village. Shikaku was fond of him, and the two were able to work together properly, meaning he quickly became Suna's Kazekage. Leaf Shinobi came round often, meaning he was able to play regularly with Naruto, and Sakura still came to love him. Eventually, the two married. Over time, Gaara would befriend all the Jinchuriki, and the nine formed a council who regularly met to discuss Bija matters, and to just hang out. However, in all Gaara's dreams, his father never appeared. He simply had no interest at all in the man, so there was no enjoyment to be gained in defeating or befriending him. Raza was written out of Gaara's life, and of course, nobody ever questioned it. Certainly not Gaara himself. He was just glad that when he slept, his dreams were peaceful ones. Rock Lee dreamed. He mastered all 8 gates, and became the first shinobi in history to use all 8 without dying. He defeated Team 7 in combat, then continued to travel the world with his teammates, Ten and Sai. Their days were filled with boundless adventure, defeating monsters, saving princesses, and proving to all the power of youth. And if he ever became tired, felt the urge to stop, take a break, settle down, he simply brushed it off, and moved on to the next fight. Fugaku Uchiha dreamed. In his dream, he discovered Shimura Danzo's manipulations much earlier on. He led a strike force of the strongest members of his clan, Itachi included, with Neji tagging along, of course, and in one swift stroke, tore down the entirety of Root and struck down its leader. The Uchiha regained their status in the eyes of the village, honorable and respected, and when Hiruzen Sarutobi stepped down, Fugaku was elected Hokage in his place. The workload of such a position was oddly low, of course, allowing Fugaku to do what he had wanted to do the whole time: be a husband to his wife and father to his children. Sasuke grew up knowing his dad loved him, not feeling pressured to meet any standards, yet soaring above them anyhow. Itachi had a long talk with Fugaku, and the two came to understand and respect each other. And Mikoto got all her boys home every night to eat dinner together, without any hidden plotting or manipulation. As a family. In this dream, the Akatsuki and Pain simply never appeared. Because in Fugaku's ideal world, none of his loved ones ever had to go through the suffering necessary to truly awaken their potential. And of course, without that suffering, they would never have been strong enough to win. The legendary Sannin dreamed. Tsunade never became Hokage, for she never wanted it. Her luck was brilliant, good fortune randomly befalling her on an almost daily basis to her never-ending delight, though it did sometimes cause her an odd sense of foreboding that she couldn't quite shake. She found a cure to almost every ailment to befall the world, trained many others in her methods, and spent the majority of her days living in Konoha with Dan Kato and Shizune, getting up to hijinks and causing plenty of property damage. She never got over her fear of blood. She simply never had cause to encounter it. Jiraiya was the godfather he always wanted to be. That is, an absolutely terrible role model for Naruto and a few other kids growing up in Konoha, much to their delight. He mastered Sage Mode, learned many great secrets of the universe, and then still spent his free time causing mayhem across the village. Getting drunk, going out partying, crashing in Minato and Kushina's place and waking up to her outraged screams in the morning. His luck with the ladies remained absolutely terrible, and his flirtations always ended in some amusing letdown, and he remained a bachelor indefinitely. Naturally, he complained about this regularly, but had only himself to blame. He didn't actually want an endless supply of nameless women to fall into his bed, he wanted family. And that was what he had, so he was content. Orochimaru, naturally, had aspirations much higher than those of his teammates. He sought immortality in one body, first of all. True immortality, with no sacrifices or caveats. He synthesized the Rinnegan and the Tenseigan and gave himself both, then became the Jinchuriki of the 10 Tails and controlled it perfectly. He became instated the Kamikage, the ruler above all rulers, and took over the entire ninja world, sharing with them his knowledge and his miracles. He found all, knew all, possessed all. And then he fought the Reaper and defeated it, and tore down the wall separating humanity from the Pure Lands, returning all the dead to the living and ensuring that nobody ever had to die again. Many of his subjects hated him, believed him a demon or a demagogue. Because, of course, that was what he felt he deserved. But he was reunited with his parents, and they were proud of him. All the Sannin, naturally, had each other. Because if there was one thing they all wished for above all others, it was to be a team again. Except not really. The infinite Tsukiyomi did not link the dreams of its occupants together, not without being directed to. So all three dreamed of a future with facsimiles of their loved ones. And all three were alone. Naruto Uzumaki dreamed. It was an interesting experience. Like someone had written one of those fanfictions where he was OP and everything went well. Minato arrived earlier to stop Kakashi having to kill Rin, saved Obito, found out about and sealed Black Zetsu, job done. The QB was sealed into him at birth, but his mother survived, funny how that worked, huh? And he grew up the son of the Hokage. Danzo was dealt with before he was old enough to understand what Jinjutsu was, and Minato took no shit from the other clans or villages, meaning Hinata and Sasuke both grew up fine. They became friends in the academy, got on a team together. Events played out similarly, but slightly shifted, always allowing for the people Naruto cared about to make it out unscathed. They became Chunin, then Jonin. Hunted down the Akatsuki, but got back in time to stop Pain before he actually destroyed Konoha, so Nagato was able to make it out alive. Team 7 became the greatest team in the world, the new legendary Sannin. And eventually Naruto sighed, arms leaning on the balcony of the Hokage Tower, and looked out over a perfect Konoha. This isn't real, is it? How'd you figure that? Minato asked, sat on a sofa back inside. It was sunset, the two were alone in the building. My friends. Naruto replied, not looking back. There's a disconnect, they shouldn't be like this. Minato groaned. Oh, perfect. What, did we get the characterization wrong? Naruto snorted. Breaking the fourth wall already? You've already figured it out, it's not like there's much point in lying to you and pissing you off. Minato shrugged. That would be the exact opposite of what we're going for here. So? Naruto turned back to look at him, blowing out a breath and thinking. They're perfect. Perfectly imperfect. But that's the problem, which doesn't make any sense. He bit his lip, then continued. They're the versions of themselves I want them to be most of all. That being exactly the versions of themselves that they are in reality. But, this he gestured vaguely. Their lives have been perfect. And if their lives had been perfect, they wouldn't be the way they are. Hinata, Sasuke, Haku, Sai, me. He looked down. We've all hurt. And it's been horrible, and I'd spare them it if I could, but it's made us who we are. If you take that away from them, the things they've felt, the choices they've made, you take away who they are. Or you don't, and I start to notice plot holes. Humph, Minato chuckled. Funny. I never had you pegged as the smart one. Well, there's also that the yin-yang release is letting me feel that everything is made of chakra. Oh, right, that'd make more sense. Minato paused, and tapped the table he was resting his feet on. Whether the table had been there before they had been paying attention to it wasn't really relevant. Resting on that table was a white hat, decorated in red. The Hokage's hat. It's your inauguration this evening. It is? Naruto thought about it. Oh yeah. Funny that. He raised an eyebrow. You're trying to bribe me to stay with a hat? It's what you've always wanted. Minato pointed out. Naruto rolled his eyes. Oh come on, you know damn well that it's not just the position, I know. But you can have everything else too. Minato spread his arms. Do you know what the point of this dream is? To give you your personal utopia. Anything you want, you can have it. Whatever you need, you can grab it. He snapped his fingers. Just like that. My friends are here. They aren't real, says who? Minato laughed. All you have are your senses to tell you what's real or what isn't. For all you know, your last life could have been a lie too. Anything you could possibly have hoped to gain from your teammates, any psychological motivator or reward for your friendship and compassion, you can get just as easily in here. Better, even, and in higher quantities. It's what this place is built to do. Why would you ever want to leave? Naruto paused. There's a lot of answers I can give to that. He said, eventually. But basically, it's because of the Edo Tensei. Come again? Minato asked. The Edo Tensei can bring souls back from the dead. Naruto explained. So can the Rinne Tensei. The Reaper Death Seal can trap souls, and the Reaper Release Mask can release them again. Ergo, souls exist. He picked up the Hokage hat to demonstrate, squeezing it and watching the fabric distort. They exist, and they're real, tangible, and you can prove that. Which means that I have good reason to believe that other people, living, breathing, thinking, seeing, feeling people really exist. He laughed a little, in spite of himself, and I mean, isn't that crazy? It's an honor, genuinely, that I'm not alone. He paused, then tossed the hat back down onto the table. So I can't stay here. Not when they are out there. He looked over his shoulder, back out to the balcony. So what are we waiting for, eh? You, dipshit. Sasuke snorted. He and Hinata were sat on the balcony railing, their Rinnegan and Tensegan respectively standing out as proof that they weren't the teammates the dream had tried to thrust on him. Us two didn't feel the need to give a dramatic speech before breaking out. Well, excuse me. We don't all have magic god eyes that let us break through all the genjutsu automatically. Naruto grinned, turning around and walking towards them. He could kill you. Minato said, interrupting them. He still hadn't got up from the sofa, but he was looking at them intently. You realize that, right? If you go out there, the chance he kills you is pretty damn high. True. Hinata admitted. But when has that ever stopped us before? And besides, Sasuke pointed out, it's not like we've got this far by doing the sensible thing, right? What they said. Naruto flashed back an apologetic smile. Sorry, Dream. I'm not hitting the snooze button on this one. Heh. All right then. Minato stood up. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you all. Given that you're not real, that means diddly squat. Naruto pointed out. Yeah, but this does imply that you think that you're doing something your father would be proud of. Minato pointed out. Huh. Oh, well, I'll take it. Naruto shrugged and turned around, holding his arms out. How does this work? You stop being a moron and let us break your genjutsu for you. Sasuke answered. Now come here. Both of them each took one of his hands. There was a flash. Naruto awoke and found himself blind and slimy and there were arms holding onto his, so he just braced himself and let them tug with a sickening squelch. He was pulled free. He landed on hard stone and shivered, his whole body and clothing covered in something, blinking to adjust to the low light. What, he coughed, spitting out some goop that had accumulated in his mouth. What in the fuck, I remember when you used to have a problem with swearing. Guess that's character development? Sasuke's voice chuckled from somewhere nearby. Try to focus up. You've been out for less than 30 seconds, but I wouldn't be surprised if it feels like a lifetime. It's nasty, I know. Burn it off with chakra as soon as you can. Hinata's voice was reassuring, and what was probably her arm wrapped underneath his, hauling him to his feet. Blink, you should get your sight back pretty quickly. Unless that was just our dojutsu helping us out. No, I'm good. Naruto patted her shoulder, shaking his head and wiping his face clean of gunk. He looked back, and I was in that? His teammates has pulled him out of a bulb in a giant mass of plant matter. Naruto wasn't initially able to understand what he was looking at, but as he panned his view up, left, and right, he realized. The root he had been removed from was as tall as a building, looked about as thick too, and in one direction it spread outwards all the way to the horizon, sometimes dipping below the surface or rising higher in its path. If he looked far enough, he could see it criss-crossing with and separating from dozens of other roots, just like it. Then Naruto traced it the other way, and saw the world tree. He genuinely couldn't describe its size, because he didn't have a proper frame of reference for anything near to its height. The biggest thing he'd ever tried to conceptualize was Madara's Susanoo, and the tree was many times the height of that. Its roots spread in all directions, tearing the landscape apart to make room for them. On a hunch, Naruto closed his eyes, and then reopened them, narrowed. Oh, that's not fair. He muttered. What? Sasuke asked. I'm feeling for senjutsu. But there isn't any. Naruto gestured at the root. This thing, it's absorbing it. All of it. Shit, it feels like the air's got no moisture in it. Well, that's bad. Hinata moved towards him and put another hand on his shoulder, but this time it wasn't just for reassurance. Chakra flowed across from her to him. It means we'll still have to do this to fuel you, unless you can find a way to fix it. Oh, damn, you're right. I'm still technically dying. Naruto winced. The yin-yang release, which, by the way, he had absolutely no idea how to control, he was just making it up as he went, was the only reason he was able to use the chakra he borrowed rather than it just falling apart upon his broken tenketsu. Sorry, guys, I don't. If you dare to say anything along the lines of you being a burden, I will slap you. Hinata warned. Shut up and call your orbs back. Naruto smiled, gratefully. Right. Another moment of focus and the surface of the root burst in 6 separate places, the truth-seeking orbs having been swept up in the chaos but left intact. He looked between his teammates and sighed. Shall we get this over with then? It didn't take them too long to reach the foot of the tree. There, sat in Saiza atop a small rock outcropping, was a man with 3 eyes. All of them were closed. Do you hear that? Asked Madara Uchiha as they approached. All 3 stopped to listen. There was the quiet whistling of wind. The occasional echo of small rocks falling in the distance. If they strained, the flower of the god tree could be heard rustling far above them. Eventually, Sasuke spoke up. Nothing. Precisely. Madara answered, still not looking up at them. Nothing. The sounds of nature, perhaps, plants, animals, weather. But other than that? He paused for effect. Silence. He raised one hand, gestured. These roots spread across the entire surface of the planet. Every human being in the world has been ensnared, and is now dreaming. For the first time in millennia, the world is asleep. At peace. So this is it, then? Hinata asked. This is your endgame? Put the entire planet in a coma? The infinite Tsukuyomi shows to everyone what they want most in the world. Madara answered, simply. They are trapped in eternal bliss, unable to harm one another. Everyone is at peace, now. He tilted his head up to them. Everyone except you. You expected anything less? Naruto smirked. Madara sighed. Stood. No. He opened his eyes, and his sheer presence hit them all like a bijou bomb. Those with special eyes could see the chakra swirling about him like a hurricane, and Naruto could feel the magnitude of the natural energy that was contained within his body. What they were looking at was quite literally the strongest being to exist in this reality since the Sage of 6 Paths. They all decided simultaneously to at least try to get out of this. You are aware that this turns people into Zetsu, right? Sasuke pointed out. Like if you leave them like this, I'm aware. I fixed it. Madara rolled his eyes. It would be a bit anticlimactic if I had to give up because of something like that. No, everyone will be fine. Forever. Literally, in fact, they won't ever die while nursed in the Shinju tree's roots. Immortality in the goop? Naruto shuddered. Doesn't sound nice. I mean, I'm all for not dying, but well, what's even the point of living like that? What's the problem? Madara spread his arms. For all they know, that is their world now. A gentler one. They will live their fantasy, never once knowing pain nor strife. A stagnant life. Sasuke challenged. If they never face challenges, they'll never be able to grow. I'm an Uchiha too, you realize. Madara told him, pointedly. I know full well how struggle can make one stronger. He scowled downwards. But not everything that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Sometimes it breaks you. When you're forced to crawl beneath some rocks and hide while your family is slaughtered around you, when you're taken captive by an enemy force and abused mercilessly as something subhuman, when your brother is murdered right before your eyes, he clenched his fists. Challenges may build a person up. War tears them down. He looked between them. You have all suffered, I can see it in your eyes. Do you believe that it made you stronger? They looked at each other, for a moment. No. Hinata said, eventually. But it made us who we are. I would not change that for anything. How inspiring. Madara drawled. But what of suffering to come? Surely you aren't saying you would willingly fall upon the sword for what? Character development? I'm not going to deliberately fail to solve a problem, Sasuke answered, but I'd rather risk screwing things up than run away from them. And if you had a magic button that could automatically solve any problems you might face? Madara challenged. Would you press it? Even if you knew there was a risk you and your loved ones might get hurt if you didn't? Well. Naruto shrugged. We're all here, aren't we? He paused to let that sink in. Then suggested, take everyone out of the Tsukuyami and offer it to them freely now they've had a taster, see how many agree to go back in. I'm sure there'll be some, but it isn't going to be everyone. Probably not even a majority. Madara growled. Biases. He muttered. Of course they won't want to. They'll be afraid of something going wrong, afraid of me lying, afraid of giving up their choices. Doubts, stupidity, irrationality, and then they'll go ahead and make the wrong decision. Ooh, biases. Hinata rolled her eyes. Have you ever heard of my favorite one of those? It's called the bias. It's when you point out that the other person has a flaw in their line of thinking, and then use that to throw out the entire argument without weighing it fairly. You're clearly biased, so I'm going to make decisions for your own good. Naruto grit his teeth. Oh ho, wow. You just said that then as an example, and I actually just wanted to hit you, that was nuts. Sasuke snorted. Yeah. Try having a parental figure, you get stuff like that all the time. He looked back at Madara. So that's what this boils down to? You think you know better than people? Madara shrugged. In short? Yes. Oh, wow, he's telling the truth, Hinata muttered. So you're going to use power to make the people do what you believe is best for them. Naruto sighed. You're just like Pain. Except I already turned Pain into a good guy. Hey, you ever hear that one study about giving 50 Ryo conditionally and 5 Ryo unconditionally to get people to do a task? Madara smiled, wryly. Hashirama ran that study. We argued about this for years. Decades, even. No matter what, it always came down to freedom versus safety. To whether or not people should be allowed to make their own decisions, and to what degree. In the end, our difference in opinion was a simple one. After everything he'd seen, Hashirama still believed in people. And after everything I'd seen, I didn't. Madara sighed. Looked back up at them. If you can't come up with any arguments you aren't going to convince me. Naruto looked at him for a long few seconds, trying to find any holes in the simple, blank wall Madara had constructed as his argument. Hoping that he'd be able to find something in Madara's face he could point to as the source of why he was mistaken or irrational, a false piece of evidence he could pull up with a loud objection. After all, he'd always been able to swing people around to his way of thinking before, but what he saw wasn't pride, or anger, or greed, or fear. Madara wasn't lying to himself. Madara was just sad. I believe you, Naruto said, quietly. And then he started planning how to kill him. Madara chuckled, and Hinata and Sasuke both gave Naruto shocked looks at the first genuine emanation of killing intent they'd ever felt from him. It wasn't the hot rage of the Kyuubi, the dispassionate ambivalence of Orochimaru, or the zealous certainty of Pain. It was a man who placed murder as his absolute last resort, finally resorting to it, the determination of a kind person going to war. It could have put the entirety of Konoha's Umbu in the hospital by itself. Okay. Madara reached both hands up above his head. Children, you've had your extra 5 minutes playing out past curfew, but now? It's bedtime. Naruto and Hinata blinked, and Sasuke held a hand up. As the only person here with an actual father figure, I'm the only one who understands that enough to be intimidated. I am trying to limit casualties as much as possible. Madara continued. As I said, what I want is for everyone to suffer as little as possible. There's a reason I left so many people alive during the pathetic excuse for a war we just experienced. To that end, I have moved the cocoons of any ninja nearby more than 20 kilometers away from the Shinju tree, meaning we can do this with minimal collateral damage. Ah, that's nice. Hinata praised. I'm doing it so I can freely use my strongest Susanoo. Oh. Madara looked them all over. I would like to offer, one final time, for you all to surrender. I'll remove your pesky eyes and powers and lock you in your dream fantasies forever. But to sweeten the pot, I'll even allow you to retain your memories of what's happened in the real world, and sync your dreams so you can truly interact with each other. I'd really rather we didn't do this. Afraid? Sasuke asked. No. Madara told him, simply. This is called mercy. Just for completeness, he is telling the truth. Hinata remarked. While I do appreciate the offer, Naruto cracked his knuckles. Looked left and right, checking his teammates' faces, and finding only determination. I'm afraid we'll have to decline. Very well. Madara held out one hand. A staff made of yin-yang release came into being there, and he slammed its butt into the floor. He started flying. Then I am going to kill you. I will not hesitate, I will not showboat, I will not give you second chances, and I will not make stupid mistakes. I will not take risks. That was always Hashirama's forte. If you require time to prepare yourselves or there is some business you need to conclude, you may take the time to do so now. Madara then turned away. Not that it would actually affect his sensory abilities, but the thought was nice. Naruto, Sasuke and Hinata all immediately huddled, connecting to each other with a Jinjutsu and a chakra sharing trick they'd picked up from Kurama for communication their target couldn't pick up on. Do you think anyone's ever told him that he's really badass? Sasuke asked. Like, come on. That was awesome. Was it true? All true. Hinata replied. I'm going to be honest, I think we're out of our league here. Guys. Naruto thought, very forcefully. Come on. Did being out of our league stop us getting the bells off Kakashi? Beating Zabuza? Beating the goddamn one-tails as genin without even using our bijou or dojutsu? He grinned at them. Madara has made one fatal miscalculation. Which is? Sasuke and Hinata asked, simultaneously. He's from the past. Naruto explained, smugly. For the first time in 5 years, Team 7 is finally working together to take down a single opponent and Madara doesn't even know why he should be afraid. So what I'm saying is, let's show him. With that, they began to strategize. If we fuck up once, we die. 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 All three of them repeated it one last time across the telepathic connection. They had taken a whole minute of real time to check their equipment, catch their breath, and strategize. Throughout it all, Madara had continued to float impassively at the foot of the tree, looking away from them and hardly moving a muscle. The only reason they had taken so long was the simple logic that he was thinking faster than them, so at some point in the last minute he'd have run out of things to plan and left them with free time to catch up. Hopefully. There was a lot of hoping going on at the moment. But Naruto was still dying, and he was draining chakra from them faster than they could naturally recuperate, so eventually there wasn't much point in delaying any longer. Now, what Madara counted as an inciting incident to end their prep time wasn't clear, and asking him, thus indicating they were trying to abuse his generosity, probably wouldn't go down well. But there was nothing wrong with just testing the waters, right? For Konoha. Hinata said, out loud, entering his stance. For the Republic. Sasuke intoned, throwing Samahata. For Skyrim, for sure, and for Sovngarde's freedom. Naruto joined in, catching the sword and twirling it. For 7 years ago, I had a Sasuke was interrupted as Naruto stabbed Samahata right into the bark of the nearby root. Madara turned around. The following events would all occur within the next 10 seconds. Sage chakra, absorbed from the world over and being transmitted back through the roots to the Shinju tree, began instantly to flow through into Samahata. Just as instantly, Madara went from floating stock still to flying towards them at a not insignificant fraction of the speed of light, all his truth-seeking orbs flying with him. Naruto stretched one arm out and his 6 orbs blasted towards the attacker, colliding with 6 of Madara's 10 and temporarily keeping those out of action as Hinata interposed herself. TCM activating, she launched a beam of counter chakra at the incoming monster, and 2 more black orbs merged together in front of him to block it, his momentum not changing in the slightest. The 2 remaining orbs swung round on an arced path from either side, which was about the time when Sasuke switched places with a stone outcropping beneath and behind Madara, launching up the needle sword Nuabari with no expectation of actually landing his perfectly aimed hit to the cranium, but at least meaning to distract one of the spheres it froze in midair, and Sasuke promptly went Shinra Tensei, causing a wave of force to emit out from his position and hit nothing? Holy fuck, it feels so good to finally be the one to use that busted power, Sasuke remarked. And Sasuke, what was that? Naruto thought. Limbo clones. Sasuke thought back. He pulled Rado from his bracer, each half of the twin swords blocking something before an invisible force punched him in the face, sending him reeling. Nuabari came rocketing down from the air towards him, and he was barely able to twist the arm attack to its string enough to make it bury into the floor beside him rather than his neck. He has 4 of the fuckers now. I still can't see them. Naruto flexed his fingers and launched out a web of chakra chains, aiming to grab Madara, who was still approaching Hinata. He grit his teeth as another of Madara's orbs transformed itself into a net that caught the chains. Sasuke landed on his feet, a chunk of the skin on his left arm rising out, revealing a metal hose and a flamethrower. Oh my god, this power set is crazy, blasted out a gout of fire that washed over 2 otherwise invisible silhouettes, his sword blocking something else before he coughed as something else visibly grabbed his head on both sides, preparing to twist, as Naruto accelerated the plan by yanking Samahata out of the wood, the sword dissolving and flowing over his body as he put his hands in the shadow clone position and Madara reached Hinata, the 2 orbs he'd been shielding with blowing straight through the artificial arms she'd been using for the attack and zooming back to pin her wings while his arms batted away her taijutsu defense and his final unoccupied orb swung down to her head. Madara's Rinnegan shifted back into his Mangekyo. He kicked her in the stomach and sent her crashing away as the 3 orbs he'd set on her swung back around, shielding the back of his head just before a red laser struck it. The laser fired by Sasuke's Azura path, from a small compartment in the back of the flamethrower, that should have melted through Madara's skull and cooked his brain at the speed of light. Bullshit! Shouted Sasuke, Rinnegan flashing as he teleported away mid-neck snap, barely able to keep his head on his shoulders. He's not lightspeed, there's no way he had time to react to that. The Uchiha staggered as he landed, also note to self, Ameno Dejikara is really fucking chakra draining, I can't keep spamming it. You named it? Naruto thought across, busy with his own efforts. 3 shadow clones popped into existence around him, and all 4 of them charged forwards. He tossed Samahata back to Sasuke as he passed, having gotten what he needed, and he and his clones all flashed into Sage mode, recalling his truth-seeking orbs. Even with Sage mode, he still couldn't sense the Limbo clones, but Hinata's prediction proved correct. Being unable to see an opponent was nowhere near enough to stop him. A brief buffering wind stirred up the rock dust beneath them into a cloud, one the Limbo clones all disrupted by moving through. That, combined with the pressure of the wind caused by their movement, made it easy enough for the Sage clones to do battle with them. They clashed in a 4-on-4 brawl. Meanwhile, Hinata had just barely hit the floor from Madara's kick, and he had noticed the weakness of her cloak dropping, blasting through the air towards her like a bloodhound catching the scent of weakness. Hinata rolled to her feet and thrust her arms out, launching as strong a wave of telekinetic force as she could at Madara, while Sasuke joined in from the other side with a Bancho Tenin. Their combined power was barely able to halt Madara's ordinary flying speed. It didn't do anything for the 10 truth-seeking orbs roaring towards Hinata even faster than he had. She took in the speeds and trajectories of the homing projectiles, and concluded avoiding them all was impossible. Without the Tenseekin cloak still charging, she couldn't block them either. A hurried thought conversation ensued. Then both Hinata and Sasuke's eyes reverted to their middle forms at the same time. Hinata jumped away from the orbs and was able to dodge a whole 4 of them. The 6 remaining tore into her body, Vishnu power-up shattering as she lost 3 arms, a leg, and took 2 massive puncture wounds through her stomach. Simultaneously, a blast of Keshotoketsu tore out from her eyes towards Madara, at the same time as a dragon made of Amaterasu lashed out from Sasuke. Madara had committed all his orbs to the attack, but that didn't leave him defenseless. A quick blast of Shinra Tensei cleared him a sphere of freedom. Meanwhile, back on the ground, Sasuke forced his Rinnegan back into being and stretched a hand out. The King of Hell emerged from the ground, opening its mouth, and Hinata's broken, but not yet dead, body crashed forwards into it. The mouth snapped shut. Just before all this, Naruto was fighting his own battle. Not against the Limbo clones, that was secondary. His opponent was the fucking tree. He and his 3 clones whipped the truth-seeking orbs around them as a unit, clashing with the invisible enemies from another dimension. Either the Limbo clones couldn't use Rinnegan powers, or were simply hiding the fact that they could until a good opportunity struck. Either way, Naruto was grateful, because he couldn't use any jutsu period. Not with his remaining shreds of chakra being shared between him and clones. Is this what normal ninja feel like? The need for restraint? How do you all cope? This is pitiful. Worst was his sage reserves. The amount he drained at the start of the battle was pittance, and split between his clones, they were all about to run out. He needed more, enough to power up large numbers of clones for extended periods so he could actually fucking contribute to the fight. He needed whatever Madara was getting. He needed the Shinju tree. Getting his clones killed was easy, but doing so in a way that freed him was much harder, so he had to really strategize. At his command, the truth-seeking orbs all swirled into a protective sphere around the central Naruto, abandoning his clones on the outside. The Limbo clones quickly dealt with the remaining Naruto and pressed in, quickly formulating a plan to try and get in from under the ground. However, they had neglected to properly factor in Naruto's practically non-existent sense of self-preservation. It wasn't really him within the protective dome. 2 of the shadow clones had been casually tossed away by the Limbo Madara. Only a small amount of effort had been expended because only a small amount of effort was required to make them pop. But they had also accidentally done the same thing to the real Naruto, who drew in the orbs after himself as he sprinted away from the Limbo clones towards the base of the tree Bansho Tenin. HRK. Naruto felt an all-too-familiar pull in his gut, and was yanked back towards the real Madara, still barely being protected by the Shinra Tensei he'd just fired. Which meant that Naruto was being pulled towards a sphere of Amaterasu and Keshotoketsu, right as the last of his sage chakra ran out. He grimaced and stretched one hand downwards, adamantine chains digging into the stone and dragging him off his path and towards the ground. He landed beside Sasuke, growling and rolling to his feet, and Limbo. Shouted Sasuke in his head, because right, those aren't busy anymore, which was when the mouth of the King of Hell opened. Hinata jumped outwards, body completely intact and Tensiken cloak flaring, with a wide sweep of counter chakra that, presumably, forced the Limbo clones away. Madara's Shinra Tensei ended, and the elemental attacks fell in onto him. He just floated out of the chaos. Body burning, but a quick sweep over of his returning truth-seeking orbs solved that issue, and he regenerated all the damage practically instantly. His eyes narrowed just a tiny amount. And then, for the first time in the combat, he started weaving hand seals. Tengai Shinsei Ultimate Meteor Storm. Sasuke's professional tactical assessment of the situation was that they were completely and utterly fucked. Madara had began with a simple blitz using his strongest powers. And that hadn't worked, so now he was going to start playing tricksy. Using his less directly OP but more varied and ridiculous powers to keep them on their toes. Catch them out and kill them, or if not, keep them burning through their chakra reserves until they ran dry. Any idea why we haven't seen his Susanoo yet? Naruto thought into the group. Pragmatism. Sasuke answered. And the Power Ranger effect. He knows if he brings out his strongest powers, we'll bring out ours. He thinks the odds of us pulling a win off go up if we resort to that, and we aren't doing that yet because one big attack on our part will drain our chakra completely. So shouldn't we try it? Hinata asked. Depends. We're still in normal mode because he's confident he can outsmart us. You want to contest that? We've got 2 genii and the world's trickiest moron. Naruto's reassuring voice came in. We got this in the bag. That was when it started raining meteors. The insert synonym for big rocks weren't quite as insert synonym for bigger as the ones Madara had dropped on the Alliance earlier in the war, but this time there were dozens of them and more falling all the time. Sound became meaningless, nothing could be heard above the explosive roars of each successive meteorite pummeling into the ground around them like a jackhammer and turning the terrain into a mass of craters, peaks, and flying debris. Take Alduin's signature attack from Skyrim and multiply everything by 100, you might get something vaguely resembling what was going on now. It looked like the sky itself was burning. Team 7 scattered, and the moment they had done so they realized it was a mistake as Madara and his Limbo clones hunted them through the hellstorm. The Jinchuriki Senjutsu let him sense their locations exactly, and Sasuke quickly found himself being hounded by 3 of the Limbo, all of whom are as strong as Madara is FUCK this power set. Sasuke punched one in the chest with an Amaterasu Raisin Kunai. It was knocked backwards, but there was no other response, and he took a fist to the gut for his trouble. His back crashed into one of the fallen meteorites, but he ignored the pain and caught the arm of the next Limbo clone to strike at him. He twisted, using its body as a human shield to block another kick, then gripped his captive on the neck. Human path? Nothing. Predapath? Let him push his hand inside their body, but no other effect, and by that point the clone had counter-grappled and thrown him into the arms of another, and a punch was coming in towards the back of his neck that would sever his spinal cord. His eyes turned upwards, towards a falling meteor directly above him. Only about the size of a car, but with plenty of momentum. All right, fuckers, let's see if you can survive this. Eyes straining, he used a Menotajikara to switch places with the rock. All 3 Limbo clones were crushed beneath it, and Sasuke found himself hundreds of meters up with a perfect bird's-eye view of the battlefield. Madara has chased Hinata down again, and Sasuke witnessed what was probably in the top 5 fastest taijutsu brawls of all time. Hinata was a white-blue blur, 4 arms, 2 legs and 2 wings flashing like this was JoJo's Bizarre Adventure or something. Even with her amazing skill, though, she didn't stand a chance. Madara was still faster, still stronger, and still possibly flat-out better than her. He dismantled her defense, grabbed her by the throat, pulled up a Rinnegan rod in one hand frozen Kesho Deketsu, and shattered the distraction effortlessly, but by that point his attention was already elsewhere. Naruto had pinned his own Limbo clone down with truth-seeking orbs, and made another dash for the tree. Madara had been flying straight for him, and again used Bansho Tenin to pull the Uzumaki back. The distraction was enough. Hinata thrust her arms forwards, calling out Hirajikoma. And while Madara blocked it, obviously, he couldn't turn the block into a grab, and Hinata was able to use her flight and telekinesis to disengage. He didn't run her down, instead continuing to chase after Naruto. Sasuke looked back and watched the Limbo clones he'd tried to destroy shove the meteor off them and start moving again, completely unharmed. We need a way to deal with the clones. He shouted into the link. More importantly, we need to get Naruto up that tree. Hinata interceded. That's the 2nd time he's gone out of his way to stop it. What's the range on his universal pull? Mine's almost 30 meters. His first was about double that, but it might be a double bluff. Sasuke warned. This is the 2nd time he's given up the opportunity to kill me to catch Naruto. Hinata retorted, he wouldn't do that for mind games. Naruto, there must be some benefit for you getting Samahata to that tree. Great. Naruto enthused. Now save me. While flying through the air in Madara's pull, he span vertically twice then kicked a small meteor that was falling atop him, sending it hurtling towards Madara. Madara completely ignored it, and it clattered off his chest. Once again, 6 orbs crashed against 10, and Madara had the advantage. 2 of the spares swung down to shatter the chains Naruto tried to use to change his path, while the other 2 hovered dangerously behind Madara's shoulders, waiting until his target came within range, and possibly in case Sasuke attempted to teleport in and intervene. And Hinata was too far away to effectively intercede. Hinata! Sasuke shouted. Gravity was much slower than he might have liked. He launched down kunai with wire attached and pulled himself faster, giving it a little extra leftward force to dodge another falling meteor. Assassination Plan 12. Hinata turned to him and nodded, dropping into what might have seemed like a position to catch him even as she used her telekinesis to speed him up. Sasuke waited until the literal smallest division of time he could physically process before he collided with her, when he was a hair's breadth away from her arms that really didn't seem to have friendly intentions. Across the battlefield, Madara's Rinnegan shifted back to Mangekyo, and the two truth-seeking orbs he had in reserve dropped into physical contact with his shoulders. And then Sasuke triggered his Amenotajikara, switching places with Madara. "And you didn't know I could do that, did you? Oh, come on." Hinata shouted 512 palms. But the two orbs Madara had brought with him, he brought them in advance. How did he react to it? In advance, flew into a shield in front of him and caught the blistering tirade. Sasuke and Naruto were now both falling, and the former held out Samahata to the latter, shouting, "Here! Get up there!" And Madara, for the first time looking like he was actually being strained by his actions, pointed a finger at a spot in the center of the war zone and said, "Chibaku Tensei." Team 7 all started to fall sideways. If a meteor storm hadn't looked cool enough, imagine a meteor storm where every meteor that fell was being sucked towards a central point, gaining even more momentum as they did and moving to crush the insolent children that had dared to exist anywhere near them. Does anyone remember when this was all about ninja? Like, sneaking, and knives, with some small bits of magic? Naruto thought, sounding on the verge of a mental breakdown as he dodged another rock. "Don't panic," Hinata told them. "We can do what the Sannin did. Summon our sage creatures and reverse summon to their sanctuaries. Naruto, this will be a great chance to drop down shadow clones there and drain Senjutsu from the tree roots." Sasuke was silent in the chakra Skype call. He was too busy thinking. How is Madara doing this? How is he predicting us so well? How? Think. All three had already taken more than enough hits to have blood about their persons. As one, they took some in their hands, put them together, and shouted summoning jutsu. And nobody came. In Mount Mayaboku, in Shikatsu Forest, in Ryuchi Cave, and in the Angel Mountains, enormous roots tore up through the walls and ground. Toads, slugs, owls, and snakes all struggled weakly in the grasp of twisted, hungry branches. The Shinju tree fed upon natural energy, after all. Its roots had been drawn to those hidden places as inevitably as water flows downhill. Kudos struggled harder than most, his Mangekyo flashing a deep, angry red, screeching his defiance to the world. But he could not free himself. And when his mistress called, he could not answer. Fuck. Team 7 reached the center of the rapidly forming planetoid. Hinata wrapped her wings around Naruto and Sasuke, trying to save them all from the worst of the buffeting as she strove desperately to use her own powers to pull them out of the gravity well. But there was nothing she could do to match the power of the Jinchuriki of the 10 Tails, not alone. Sasuke was barely even paying attention. His Rinnegan darted about, looking at Madara charging up something in his hands, seeing the 4 Limbo clones all arraying themselves out in front of their master. Meanwhile, his mind whirled, darting from concept to concept as fast as his neurons could fire. The Limbo clones, the Rinnegan, the summoning, where did everything come from? Why was Madara so smart? How much chakra do I have left? How can Madara predict what we're going to do? The rocks piled down on top of them, slowly blocking out their view of the outside world. The last thing Sasuke witnessed before everything went dark was Madara building up an enormity of lightning chakra in his arms, and shouting Indra's arrow. Then, there was absolutely nothing to see. The darkness was total, inescapable. And finally, Sasuke saw. And, in an elegant 4-step plan, he knew exactly what he had to do. His eyes briefly closed, as he whispered an apology to his future self. Then they opened again. Chaotic planetary devastation. Step 1 completed. Counteract Chibaku Tensei. The planetoid shattered, the outward wave of force turning it into a frankly enormous fragmentation grenade that tore pieces of broken stone miles upon miles away. If the world survived, children would be venturing out and finding shards of it across the 5 nations for decades to come. What Sasuke was feeling was frankly beyond pain at this point. He'd never felt anything like it and never wanted to again, but knew he was in for much worse before this little maneuver was completed, as he forced himself to push off forwards, jumping between the stone shards of his recent prison and riding their momentum up towards Madara. Madara didn't even seem surprised. He simply hurled the enormous lightning bolt. Oh, the one that all used really was a miniature. So this is my ancestor's signature, huh? Glad he was as much of a dramatic bitch as we all are. Ignoring the screams of his teammates in his thoughts, Sasuke rode the wreckage straight towards the incoming bolt, one arm reached out. Of course, Madara's variant was imbued with senjutsu. It didn't turn Sasuke to stone, far too much for that, just began to obliterate his cells on contact. He didn't even bat an eyelid as his arm began to disintegrate. An arm that didn't exist hurt less than the rest of him did right now, and besides, it meant he was in contact with it. He stared past its blinding brilliance, focusing his vision on Madara's limbo clones. Not the simple projection of force that they appeared as in this world, no, he focused on what the Rinnegan could uniquely see. On where they really were. Ameno Tajikura was greater than it initially seemed. Sasuke had instinctively known that its reach was greater than simply taking him to other objects, to other people, that it was daring him to expand its reach further, a dare he was all too happy to take. After all, we know other dimensions exist at this point, right? Sasuke wrapped his consciousness around himself and the arrow, and punched a hole through the fabric of reality. Step 2 completed. Counteract Indra's arrow. He vanished from the dimension he'd spent his entire existence up to that point in, and now he was falling through empty space, stars all around him and the vacuum so cold he latched back onto his target, and tore through another hole. The dimension he appeared in was one of ice, freezing and terrible, so cold that even in the split second he spent there his skin hardened and frosted. Tore through another. This was a dimension full of fire and lava, so hot his skin blistered and cracked, still the wrong place but closer, and Indra's arrow was still with him, burning almost up to his elbow now. Tore through another, and entered a world that was cold, but not unbearably so. Beneath him was a snowy landscape, and a large stone fortress, on the roof of which two figures with pale white hair looked up at him in shock. Tore through another, and the blank, geometric world he saw around him now could only be Kamui. There were even signs of combat and a splash of blood far below him, if he looked. His body was shutting down, tearing apart beneath him. He simply didn't have the power to do this. So he used the Pretapath to draw energy from the arrow, even as it accelerated the rate that the senjutsu tore his arm to shreds. Come on, I don't care what happens after, I just need to last a few more moments. He tore through another hole. This world was blank. White, from horizon to horizon. With a laugh, he realized this might be the same place Hagoromo had brought them when he'd granted them their powers. Didn't think I'd be returning so soon, did you? But most importantly, below him were 4 small pinpricks of something in the endless nothing. 4 pinpricks that were looking up at him in absolute bewilderment. Hello, boys. He screamed down to the limbo clones. I'm back. Sasuke released his conscious grip on the Indra's arrow. Then he tore one last hole and vanished into it. What the rest of the combatants saw was Sasuke run up to Madara's coup de grace and both vanished through a hole in the air. A split second later, Sasuke returned through the same hole, tumbling helplessly through the air. His right arm was gone, his skin had all been burned off, and blood and guts poured from his mouth. The remnants of his tongue. He hit a rock on the way down, throwing him into an even more helpless fall and snapping one leg at the hip. As he span, however, he was able to get a beautiful view of the 4 limbo clones looking terrified for a good full millisecond. Then Indra's arrow hit them in their own dimension. The 4 constructs vanished in a whisper of wind. Step 3 completed. Neutralize limbo clones. His Rinnegan regressed at that point, as did his Mangekyo and his Sharingan entirely. Ordinary, dark black eyes looked up at Hinata and Naruto, who, never the type of people to stand in gawk, flew down towards him. They caught him about 10 meters off the ground, and lowered him the rest of the way. Sasuke! Naruto shouted in his face, which was rather inconsiderate, or not really. Sasuke was practically deaf anyway at this point. What did you just do? Madara's secret. He thought up at them. His tenuous grasp on even the basic communication genjutsu was faltering, but he forced himself to provide his teammates one final tool. The way he can predict us so well, I figured it out. In hindsight it was simple enough, though he's supposed in hindsight everything was. The biggest clue had been something so innocuous, Sasuke would never have noticed it if he hadn't been paying attention to the exact same things in himself. Why had Madara's eyes always gone back to Mangekyo when his life was in the greatest danger? With his last strength, Sasuke shared Madara can use his Sharingan to rewind time. Also, I love you. Step 4, completed, reveal Madara's Mangekyo ability. Then the connection cut, and he knew nothing at all. Sasuke! Naruto screamed, as his friend slumped, and Hinata found with some surprise that she'd shouted her teammate's name as well. He's not dead. She called across the bond, eyes roving over Sasuke's vitals. But I have no idea how. His brain signals are going to cut out any second. Any second, however, gave Ninja a lot of time. Naruto inhaled and set Sasuke down. He picked up Samahata from where it lay, having toppled out of Sasuke's outstretched hand. Then he turned back to the battle. Time rewind. He sent to Hinata. Think Sasuke was right? Yes. Hinata answered, honestly, somewhat amused by how far she'd come from hating the Uchiha's guts. I trust Sasuke completely. If that's the conclusion he came to, I believe him. The issue is, how do we use it against the motherfucker that did this to him? Madara predicted the laser, the switch into the 512 palms. I'm sure he was doing it during the war. If he can undo his mistakes, how do we win? The same way Hashirama beat this guy his entire life. Naruto replied. The answer felt perfectly obvious to him. We put him in a position where knowing what's going to happen won't matter. Meanwhile, Madara was looking between the two of them and the spot his limbo clones had just occupied. It will take me a whole day to get those back, he mused. Other dimensions. Noting that for later. Thunder roared above him. Though the meteor storm had stopped, it had turned the sky into a broiling mess of lightning and dark clouds. They couldn't even see the moon anymore, and Naruto briefly hoped that might have turned off the infinite Tsukuyomi. Hinata? Nope. Damn it. Madara put his hands together. I hope you didn't expect that to give you an advantage. You see, a fun thing about Yin-Yang release is that it also gives you all the other releases too. Would clone Jutsu. Oh, come on. Madara didn't stop at 4 of these clones. He made 10, then 10 more, then 10 more, and by that point the first 10 had activated their own Susanoo and were charging toward the last 2 members of Team 7. The pair exchanged a glance and a whole lot of strategy. Then Naruto hopped onto Hinata's back. As once Sasuke had ridden Naruto into battle against the One-Tails, so now did Naruto ride Hinata against the 10. Tenseken cloak active, Hinata flew forwards and slammed into one of the Susanoo's heads with both fists. Her arms flashed with audacious chakra as her lion fists burst to life, consuming the energy, making it up and causing the wood to shrivel and die. This is the advantage Sasuke fought for, fuckface. The Limbo clones had no cost for you. These bargain basement ones have weaknesses. They were trapped, obviously, because Madara had thought of this. Each clone that charged towards them was brimming with natural energy, designed specifically to stop Hinata doing exactly what she was doing. What he hadn't accounted for there was teamwork. Hinata gasped as the natural energy flowed into her system, threatening to turn her to stone. Gasped again as Naruto turned her head around and kissed her full on the lips. He used the contact to access her chakra, and drew the sage energy out of her and into himself, eyes flashing orange. Did you have to do that? Not at all. Are you complaining? Hell no. The first Susanoo wood clone disintegrated under their grasp. The next punched them, and Hinata caught its fist in one hand, repeating the process, while Naruto hurled his truth-seeking orbs at the nearest one, tearing it apart. 2 more came in, swinging swords, and Hinata vaulted them, using her telekinesis to yank both avatars towards her and drain them both, her chakra reserves rapidly filling back up to even higher than they had been before the fight had started. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Naruto shouted, and this was more like it. 6 shadow clones appeared around him, all in sage mode, each wielding one of the truth-seeking orbs as ruddy big sticks to smack about the avatars as they attacked. Madara watched from afar as his endless supply of clones, far from drowning his opponents in overwhelming force, began to fall faster and faster. But he wasn't stupid enough to keep attempting a failed strategy. Particle-style obliteration ring. A white circle with a radius of over 100 meters appeared on the ground, centered on Hinata and Naruto, and it rapidly grew brighter and brighter. Hinata met Naruto's eyes. Then she kicked him in the chest. He went flying outside the radius of the ring just as its light peaked, and then a cylinder of white energy tore up into the sky. The beam tore straight up through the clouds, causing all the swirling black storm heads around it to rumble even more dangerously from the heat. It also completely disintegrated one of Naruto's sandals, as well as, presumably, everything within the ring. That included all of Madara's own clones, but most importantly, Hinata. Naruto screamed. To his credit, the Uzumaki boy didn't let his grief distract him for even a moment. Smart. Madara couldn't actually sense anything within the giant column of his own power, but was willing to be the girl had found a way to keep herself alive, even if he'd saturated it with as much senjutsu as he could to get past her annoying counter-chakra. His plan had been to hold them in there as long as possible. They had every incentive to stay inside Faraz and absorb as much energy from the attack as they could, which would let him set up as many of the dozens of plans he'd thought of as he had time for. However, with the girl's impulsive emotional move, he now had an opportunity to put the biggest potential threat in the fight out of action right now. He ceased his concentration on the particle-style beam, and focused all of his attention on hurling his truth-seeking orbs at Naruto as fast as he could. Naruto, sailing up over Madara, resummoned his 6 shadow clones, and their respective truth-seeking orbs, with a poof of smoke, and hurled the orbs down at him. Madara briefly considered his options, then allowed his own orbs to sail past Naruto's without engaging them. The boy was making more clones up there to help him evade, and Madara would not allow him to reach the tree with a half-hearted attack. He committed all his orbs to destroying all the Naruto, not even he could tell which was which, annoyingly, and when Naruto's orbs reached him, he simply activated Shinra Tensei, the defensive wave of force enough to block the orbs for as long as it would take to destroy their caster. Good fight, Naruto. But it's over. And yet. As the 6 orbs approached the edge of his defense, 3 of them vanished in poofs of smoke. Appearing in their places was Madara. Called out 3 Hashirama Senjus who were all completely naked. It's been so long, surely if you're going to spend eternity ruling the world you could spend it with me. Madara's jaw dropped. My ultimate technique. Reverse harem jutsu. Shouted Naruto, even as Madara's orbs began to tear him and his clones apart. Madara was distracted for just barely long enough. He realized that the Naruto clones transformed to look like his ex-boyfriend weren't falling onto him, but rather around him, but by that point there wasn't anything he could do. Golden adamantine chains wrapped around the perimeter of his Shinra Tensei, and their chakra-nullifying powers pushed them through, slamming into Madara himself as the Naruto clones sheepishly dangled from the ends of the chains below, but that was still pointless because Madara still had his Sage Mode and could completely ignore their effects, which was when the particle-style attack finished. Madara looked over and that's where the other 3 truth-seeking orbs are. Hinata floated above a shield made of them, one that had cracked under the blast of annihilation but held, and now one of her hands was stretched up to the sky. The dark, clouded, rumbling sky. Griffin! Begone, thought. She screamed. The storm flashed, and lightning chakra tore down towards Madara. And without his orbs or ninjutsu, he couldn't block it. Oh, damn. That was close. His eyes reverted to the Mangekyo Sharingan. Tenback was what he had nicknamed his Mangekyo power, and it was the most exhausting thing he had. The longest he could rewind in his first life was 5 seconds, and doing that had put him in the hospital for over a week. Fortunately, most conflicts didn't require it, and with the speed ninja moved at, he rarely needed to go back more than a handful of milliseconds. But his newfound power, coupled with the newly ridiculous speeds everyone moved at, meant that it became incredibly useful for pulling himself out of difficult situations. And of course, any chakra cost was worth it to avoid being killed outright. The fact that he had been pushed to use it so many times in a single fight was a testament to his opponent's skill, power, and ingenuity. But none of that was enough to grant them the victory. He rewound barely a millisecond, watching the world around him flash into inverted colors as everyone moved backwards, including himself. He watched the events around him crucially, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim his body there. He was back just before the particle column vanished, with his eyes in Mangekyo form, and chose to make his attack a much more cautious one, only sending 4 orbs to Naruto while 6 of them intercepted the falling clones. The shadow clones disguised as orbs were obliterated on contact, and the actual orbs had their momentum halted by 3 of his own. The other 3 formed a shield above him, waiting for the moment when Hinata's clever lightning jutsu fell down from the heavens. Of course, he couldn't block that with Shinra Tensei. Not because it wasn't strong enough, because his eyes were stuck in Mangekyo form until he reached the moment in time when he had originally used the jutsu. I had never thought that that of all things would be a weakness. Today is certainly a strange one. The column of light vanished, Hinata screamed Griffin, and Naruto Madara gaped, as 2 more orbs appeared around Naruto and his clones, moving to intercept Madara's attacking 4. He only used 1 to save Hinata? Possible, if he infused it with Senjutsu, but why would he keep any of them in reserve? I was originally going to send all 10, he must have expected that. How did he? Oh, son of a motherfucking bitch, when did they figure 10 back out? Madara could do nothing but watch, helplessly. Naruto's 2 orbs crashed into 2 of Madara's, leaving only 2 free to fly towards him and the clones he'd gathered around his person. There were 6 Naruto total, all still flying with the momentum of Hinata's kick up towards the tree. Madara's orb struck, and that number dwindled to 4, then 3. One of the Naruto took the other 2, and threw them even harder away. That was then destroyed by an orb, and as the last 2 soared away, one of them turned around, fingers flashing with adamantine chains. Madara directed the last orb past it, targeting the Naruto that was the furthest away. The black material bit into his jumpsuit, and he vanished in a puff of smoke. The last Naruto continued, unimpeded, towards the tree. Fuck! Madara swore, and raged. The griffin struck his shield, which held, and he finally was able to bring his Rinnegan back active. A fat lot of use you were. He shouted at the third eye on his forehead, but by that point Naruto was out of range of Bansho Tenin. Hinata was flying up to Madara now, aiming to buy her teammate time. He sighed. Privately awarded them the award of best team he'd ever had the displeasure of fighting. And then he summoned his Susanoo. The world shook in response to its activation, and he didn't even bother analyzing its appearance, just reaching for the titanic katana at his hip, drawing it and swinging it in one smooth motion. There was a flash of light. Then Naruto and the tree were both cut entirely in 2. Alone. Madara swept his katana to one side, then resheathed it in a perfectly smooth motion. In front of him, the Shinju tree that had withstood the entirety of the chaos thus far toppled to the floor. He was a little frustrated with himself actually. Panic at Naruto's progress combined with uncertainty about the shape of his Susanoo had prevented him from going for the perfectly vertical slash for fear of missing. He had been about 5 degrees off, resulting in a slash that cut the tree diagonally from one end of the base to the opposite side of the tip, leaving the head of the flower completely intact. The same could be said for Naruto Uzumaki, in fact. Madara considered going for the finishing blow on the remnants of the boy, 2 separate chunks still falling through the air, with a big purple sword spinning off to one side, but instead concluded that it was a safer bet to turn around and face the one remaining thread of the trio. The killing intent coming off the tiny girl far below him was very impressive, all things considered. If your teammate had tapped the tree at the flower, he would have been able to drain incredible amounts of sage chakra. Maybe enough to content with me. Madara called down to her. But I do not need it to maintain the infinite Squiomi, and I do not need it to maintain 6-path sage mode. This is not an infinitely sustainable state of being for me. In a few hours I will have to give up maintaining one or the other. Or regrow the tree, which will take but a minute of concentration. Killing you, however, will take orders of magnitude less time than that. He looked down at her pityingly. It was a good attempt, but you have lost. He had hoped for a quiet acceptance from her, and would have offered once more to return her to the dream if he had seen it. He had expected defiance, some bluster or swearing or quips that he could roll his eyes at. He hadn't expected her to start laughing. Hinata leaned back and guffawed, arms dangling to either side, before shaking her head and sighing. You really don't get it, do you? She pointed past him. His brain is still working. Back behind herself, in the rough direction of Sasuke. So's his. Spread her arms out, so of course we've not lost. This is, what, the third or fourth time Naruto has basically died this war? You're only special because it's happened to you more than once before he beats your ass. She shoved her hands into the pockets of her slacks, which at this point were ripped to absolute shreds from all the fighting, and smirked up at him. And of course, if there's one thing I've learned from this, it's that Naruto will always, always, come back for me. Gonna have to pay him back for that at some point. Suck his dick or something. Point is, all I have to do is sit here and delay you until he does. Madara changed his mind on the matter of landing the finishing blow on Naruto, electing instead to do it as quickly as possible. However, it didn't look like Neji Hyuuga was going to let him. With an earth-shattering boom, the Shinju tree, or at least, a diagonal slice of it, crashed to the ground. A few moments later, the first piece of Naruto hit the ground with a much quieter thump. Shortly after that, the part of him that contained his head followed. Naruto had been burned, broken, pierced and hurt more times than he could count. He had lost fingers, teeth, arms, legs on more than one occasion. This was the first time, however, he had found himself in possession of less than half of his body. The sword had cut cleanly from just below his left hip all the way up to between his neck and his right shoulder. He had no legs, one arm, one lung, half a small intestine, and no heart. No heart? Wait, which side is the heart on? Which arm do I still have again? Heh, Sasuke's gonna be so jealous. I've gone full Anakin Skywalker. Oh my god, I don't have a dick. Madara fucking cut my dick off. Wait, did Darth Vader still have his dick, or did that get burned off? These were the thoughts he used to not go into shock, as he stuck his one hand to the stone beneath him with chakra and dragged himself forwards. Behind him, he could still hear booming explosions, and the darkness ahead of him was occasionally lit up with flashes of bright light, inevitably followed by hails of rubble and clouds of dirt. Come on, Hinata, he thought, before putting the matter out of mind entirely, focusing on robotically pulling himself further along the ground. Reach out, stick hand to the rock, pull forwards. Reach out, stick hand to the rock, pull forwards. Reach out, stick hand to the rock, pull forwards. And so it repeated, and so he went, leaving a red smear along the ground behind him. How was he not dying? The answer to that was fairly simple. He was dying, very rapidly. It was just that very rapidly meant brain death in almost 2 seconds, and that was fucking ages for him. He looked up, blinking through grit that his tears and sweat had coated to his face. Up ahead loomed the flower of the Shinju tree. He had been crawling alongside the trunk of the thing, dwarfed by its shadow. Thank fuck I landed close to the top. Get to the flower, drain the sage chakra, make sage shadow clones. Heal self, heal Sasuke, help Hinata win. Easy. Just gotta get there. Reach out, stick hand to the rock, pull forwards. The fact that he was hurting didn't really need to be stated. It was like a line of fire had been drawn through his body, and his brain didn't seem to have realized that most of him was missing. Instead, it had apparently decided that the rest of his body was definitely still there, just in absolute agony, and had informed the charred remains of his nervous system of that fact as well. His vision was blurry and his head was throbbing. He couldn't breathe, and wasn't sure if he would even be able to do anything with oxygen if he got any, but his body had decided to make him suffer for that, too. It was like, well, you can reach certain point where continuing to describe how much pain you're in becomes a bit too masturbatory, even for Naruto. Don't worry about it. You can fix it once you've got all your power back, no problem. Just get to the flower. Reach out, stick to the last shreds of his chakra cut out completely. A wave of exhaustion tore through the remnants of his body, and his chin hit the ground, as his arm scrabbled uselessly against the sheer stone beneath him. He was on a slope, actually, which he only noticed when he started to slide backwards. Naruto let out a guttural scream, pulling his arm up and stabbing it down into the stone. He crushed a hole into the rock, and used that to halt his movement backwards. Then he yanked himself forwards again, raising his bloodied fingers with broken nails to repeat the process. Reach out. Break floor. Grip floor. Pull forwards. Reach out. The scream had been a mistake. Wasted what little oxygen he did have left. Not that he had enough blood left to transmit it up to his brain, of course. And practically no chakra there either, which was bad. Those were the two things the brain needed, he was pretty sure. He didn't even know if his eyes were open anymore, everything had just gone black. Sound was gone, too, nothing was coming in through the ears. Smell and taste check? Blood. That was what those were telling him. But that was fine. All he needed was his sense of touch to know he was still going. But that was slowly numbing as well. Reach out. Break floor. Grip floor. Pull sag. Arm shaking horribly now. Grip floor. Pull forwards. Come on, come on. Come on. Hinata's out there fighting for her life. What are you doing? Wasting her time. You useless, fucking useless little orphan bastard. Come on. Reach out. Break floor. Fail. Hit again. Break floor. Grip floor. Pull forwards. Reach out. His hand hit something that wasn't rock. It was soft. Folding under his fingers. The flower. He gasped, a mistake, no air but more pain, and gripped onto it like a lifeline. All right. Come on, you fucker, what have you got for me? He reached out with his senses. Or rather, sense, since touch had failed him by that point as well. The only things he could still process were the pain, and the sixth sense he'd cultivated not so long ago. His sense for natural energy. He stretched that sense out, deep into the flower, its brilliant, vibrant red petals, then deeper, deeper, into the wood of the tree itself, to where it still touched the greater root system of the tree below it, through every fiber of the great god tree. But there was nothing. Not a shred of energy, anywhere in the tree. It was dead. Madara had killed it. Naruto felt nothing but ash. The last of his strength left him, then. He simply lay there and sobbed. Hinata breathed out. Yeah, sure, delay. Solo. Against Madara Uchiha. No problem. She looked back up at him. The Susanoo, it was just a bit fucking ridiculous at this point, really. It looked like Madara had tried to make his perfect Susanoo, and then that had just sort of exploded from the sheer mass of energy it was trying to contain. Pure white light burst out of the purple armor at the seams, and erupted out of the back. Each of its wings, laid down flat, could have spanned the distance from Konoha to the Valley of the End. Its helmeted mask was lifted up, revealing a bright white face with glowing eyes. Without her Tensiken, she wouldn't have even been able to find where Madara was inside of it. Matter of fact, without her Tensiken, she would probably have just gone blind from looking at it. It could have made the sun cough and awkwardly try to cover its face out of embarrassment. TLDR big and scary. But while she had every incentive to stand around gawking, Madara did not. He redrew his sword. Hinata reaches one hand out and called to hers. She had been tracking Samahada's fall ever since Naruto had let go of it, and guided it down towards her. As Madara raised his katana, she dropped into a low stance, back foot sliding in an arc around her. First, she activated her Vishnu. That had become majestic in its own right, two gorgeous wings, white exterior marked with elegant, intricate black patterns, and an opal halo hovering up above her head. Next, Samahada came spinning down from the heavens, and slammed into her outstretched hand. Neither of them wasted any time, and it melted in her grip and spread across her body, giving a lavender tint to the white of the Vishnu and a feathered texture to the surface. All the chakra it had collected from the wood clones, sage and otherwise, flowed into her. She used the momentum gained from the catch to throw herself further round in a circle, legs stepping around each other and coiling like a spring. Wait for it, 1.5 rotations now. Fifth gate open. Her body flashed, the lavender tinting red, hair whipping out, and she used the momentum to hurl herself in a circle faster and faster. It amused her, to a degree, that the furthest she had progressed with the gates in 4 years of training was the same level Lee had reached when he was 12. Up above, Madara's sword had reached its peak. He twisted his footing, brought the blade down behind him, and then swept it through, building momentum and in tearing through the air straight towards her, edge burning as the air in front of it didn't have time to get out of the way and simply caught fire. Down below, Hinata's eyes flashed further, and she activated her Tensiken cloak. Her body lit aglow, white, blue, and purple, hair flying through the air around her, as she channeled chakra through every tenketsu in her body. Audacious, voracious, obdurate, adamantine, she declared. Tensei Senjutsu Heavenly Spin. The dome built up around her, a sphere of perfect swirling white. Then Madara's sword hit it. The earth split, and the heavens burned, and blue flames spun up around her defense into a fire whirl that tore up into the sky. The blade struck her head on, but tilted to the right. Then, eventually, it went grating along the exterior of her defense, slipping past and swinging onwards through the air beyond her. Through the Tensiken, she was able to see Madara's shocked look as he realized that she had just directly withstood his full power. And then she flew up and punched the Susanoo in the face. Naruto floated in a void. He supposed that this was probably his mindscape, though it was looking a little different. Hey, at least the sewer's gone. He spun his viewpoint around nothing. Sheer, unadulterated nothing. Not blackness, for black is a color. Naruto could not see color. There was simply nothing at all. Medically, death occurred when the brain no longer functioned. Certain ninja knew that, more accurately, death occurred when one's soul left one's body, to one destination or another. Naruto has his own personal definition, however. Because of course, people could be called back from the Pure Lands, or the belly of the Reaper. True death occurred when all hope of being saved was gone. When nobody wanted to bring you back, never mind knew how. When the world would rather you simply did not exist. True death occurred when one was alone. In that sense, Naruto had been flirting with death his entire life. And now he was finally at her door. He couldn't feel his body, so he couldn't cry. Thought was all that was left, and even that was fading. This was it. It was over. And all that glitters is gold, only shooting stars break the mold. Naruto. The shout jolted him out of his reverie. Then he jolted again, because shout? What? He turned, nothing, nothing, nothing some more, not nothing. Oh, that was not nothing at all. Floating in front of him was a glowing golden light. It was a spark, really. Barely noticeable. If he hadn't been reduced to sensory deprivation on the scale, he would never have been able to sense it. But it was there, all right. He saw another glimmer, looking right to see a deep red light next to the first one. He turned in a circle, seeing sparks of green, white, cyan, orange, blue, black, brown. It's the bijou. Naruto realized. But that's not possible, all the bijou are in Madara, how are it's the little bits. Kurama had been trying to do something with their chakra, back when they had been trying to fight Madara and gotten cucked by Limbo. 9 tiny flickers of bijou chakra. And, looking down, a small, blue glow. His chakra. Of course. As long as I'm still here, it can't all be gone. So, here you all are. He said. It didn't quite register with him in the moment that he was saying, rather than merely thinking, but he was doing it nonetheless. All stuck in here with me. 9-tailed beasts brought together, kinda like he stopped. Frowned. It didn't quite register with him in the moment that frowning required that he had a face, but he was doing it nonetheless. Kinda like what Madara did. He kept spinning, looking between them all in turn. Madara has Sage Mode. But he couldn't gather Sage Chakra. Obito certainly couldn't. They only got the Senjutsu when they merged with you guys. Because he remembered. Because Hagoromo said you are the tree. Or, well, you're the tree but mixed with his mom. The ability to get so much of the stuff, Madara's getting it from you. From putting you all together. He cracked his knuckles together, grinning. That was when he realized that his body was back. Good. I'm gonna need it. Oh ho ho. That's what the fox meant, the power-up he was trying to get me. Oh, shit, that's what Hagoromo was gonna say. Gathering all the bijou in here, so that I could. He hesitated on the next word. Not absorb you. No, that's not me. You're all people. You're all just people, here with me, with hopes and dreams and names, and names. I bet Madara never even bothered to learn your names, did he? He turned to one of the lights, the golden brown of a particle of sand. Smallest, yet burning fiercely. Shikaku? It flashed, and flew towards him, spinning around his own chakra. And Gaara. You're here too, even if you're stuck in a dream. So it falls to me to wake you up. Matatabi? It flashed, and flew towards him. Same as Sakura, Tenten Isabu. Ino, Shikamaru, Choji, Son Goku. Gai, Lee, Kokuo. Niji, Itachi, Saiken. Haku, Sai, Chome. Irika, Killer Bee. Gyuki. Jiraiya, Orochimaru, Tsunade, Kakashi. Sasuke. Hinata. Kurama. Hinata's body was breaking apart around her, and she damn well fought like it. Her form, a tiny, insignificant pinprick, slammed into the back of Madara's Susanoo's head, making it stagger. It whirled around, flaring its wings, and she flew around with it, charging and firing a beam of energy towards its chest, digging a small hole in the surface. His sword swung, and she barely had time to get out of the way, but she stomped her feet down on the blade, stuck herself to it, and rode the thing around. A dozen bolts of light streaked from her position, striking its face and exploding, as she sprinted down the blade to the hilt. There, she stretched her arm out, manifesting a giant, ethereal replica of Samahata. She took it in both hands, coated it in every buff she could think of, jumped up, and swung it upon his wrist. The flash she got in response was highly encouraging. The giant sword crashed to the ground as the Susanoo's hand was severed at the wrist. Hinata didn't waste time, flying up to the breast of the avatar behind which she knew Madara was hiding, holding her weapon like a lance and letting out a war cry. The Susanoo's other fist hit her. The shockwave practically shook time-space. She went careening backwards, leaving a trail of shimmering lights in her wake before crashing into the ground. The Tensiken cloak was gone. She stumbled to her feet and called out heavenly spin. Again, but Madara just wound up with another punch, slamming his fist into her defense. Even without the Tensiken, her defense was barely able to hold, though she was dug about halfway into the stone beneath her. By that point, the hand she had cut off had reformed. He punched her with that, too. When she still survived, he hit her with his other fist. Then the other. She survived about 10 strikes before she couldn't hold it any longer, the blood vessels in her arms rupturing to the point where they no longer obeyed her commands. The dome of chakra, at this point at the bottom of a large new pit, shattered, and the remaining momentum of the Susanoo's fist carried it through, slamming into her body and crushing her into the stone. She tried to scream as the Titan's hand retracted, but found that she couldn't. He'd fucking pancaked her. Her head had been spared, but all of her body below her neck was practically mulch. Her bones were visible, stabbing through all the fleshy parts. You could charitably compare her to that bony one from Attack on Titan, and just like the anime, she was practically 2D at this point. Hee, that was a good one. Sasuke would give me a high five for that. Sweet Lord, I'm in pain. She could still see Madara staring down at her broken form, and watched him open his mouth. Her voice wasn't working, so she vaguely threw outwards a genjutsu that said, if you're about to make another boring-ass speech, please for the love of Kami just punch me again instead. His mouth clicked shut. Then he said aight. And pulled his fist back. Hinata braced, running through possible methods of escaping this and priming her telekinetic flight when Madara froze in place. She froze too. Wind blew across the battlefield. It brought with it a sound. Specifically, strummed guitar chords, in the pattern of G, D, a minor, and C, repeated. Madara, for the first time Hinata had seen, looked genuinely flabbergasted. No. He said, quietly. That just isn't possible. The universe does not care what you believe to be impossible. Hinata replied, with a grin. She used her telekinesis to pick up her own broken body and fly away. Madara didn't care, turning back to the tree, and the growing glow behind it. The guitar music stopped. There was an intake of breath. The stump of the Shinju tree exploded as an enormous, golden, three-headed, six-armed avatar tore past it. Body once told me the world was gonna roll me. The Indra Susanoo and the Ashura avatar both wound up a fist and punched. Their knuckles met between them, with an explosion of force that sent every cloud nearby rocketing away. Above them, a circle of perfectly clear sky appeared, above which the bright red moon waited and bore witness. Madara Uchiha was absolutely incalculably furious. Why? He grit out. Must Ashura's children never just die the first time? Naruto Uzumaki, floating within the avatar, grinned up at him. The boy hadn't had the matter to regenerate his whole body. Everything beneath the cut that Madara had made earlier was a shoddy would release creation, welded onto the rest of him with nothing but sage chakra and spite. And oh, was there sage chakra? How in Kami's name did he manifest a miniature 10 tails within himself? Is that even what that is? But he had done something, and now he was sucking in natural energy like he was a Jubi Jinchuriki himself. Even if he only had a tiny fraction of the chakra, it was enough. The tree, and with it, Madara's monopoly, was destroyed, and the only thing that mattered to amount absorbed now was force of will. Apparently, Naruto's matched Madara's own. No. Don't question it. He's Hashirama ing. Kill this twerp the same way you killed the man you loved. Don't let him get inside your head, react calmly to his chaos, and pummel him with brute force until he goes down. I can't die. Naruto shouted at him in response. Not as long as I'm not alone. Staying calm was harder than it sounded when Madara's enemies came out with shit like that. Madara roared, and struck again. Naruto had the advantage in terms of sheer number of arms. He kept 2 up in a guard about his face and used the other 4 to pummel Madara for all he was worth. Madara's Susanoo took 2 more hits to the face and a knee to the groin before realizing, hold on. I'm still half again as big as he is, and several times more powerful. He spun, brushing off Naruto's attacks and delivering a back kick that sent the avatar sprawling to the floor, and oh, bollocks, I let him make distance multi-shadow clone jutsu. And oh, wonderful, there were thousands of the things. A few spread throughout the battlefield, far too many to keep track of, but the vast majority of them simply flew. They fly now? They fly now, straight towards him, charging Raisin Shuriken. Infinity Flame! Madara shouted, bringing up his hands to his mouth and belching a ridiculous mass of blue fire out in front of himself, vaporizing clones in their thousands. He began making more hand seals, then stopped as an enormous Raisin Shuriken created by the avatar came flying towards him back. Time rewound, and instead of making seals he held his hands out to the side, re-manifesting his blade. When the Raisin Shuriken came tearing through the remnants of his fire breath, he slid to the side and swept his katana right through it. The two have separated, tearing valleys into the earth some distance away. Madara ignored them, charging forwards and lopping 2 of Naruto's avatar's arms off, then cracking the butt of the blade into his head to stagger him. He brought it back into a high guard, ready to swing down, stopped, when he heard a very specific word he had primed himself to pick out of the chaos. Get up, Sasuke! Shouted one of the miscellaneous clones on the battlefield. This is no place to die. Madara turned within his defense, and saw the clone flying an unconscious Uchiha across the battlefield, channeling life-giving chakra into the young man. Oh no you don't. Madara turned to intercept them, but got rugby tackled by Naruto Prime, the golden avatar keeping its weight low and straining to try and overbalance him. Fool! Madara let his Susanoo be lifted off its feet. Then he beat his wings, kicked Naruto in the face, and flew even higher. All 3 faces of the thing looked up at him dumbstruck as he rocketed into the air. 1 wing beat, 2, 3, and then he turned and propelled himself downwards. The avatar jumped backwards, managing to avoid as Madara's Susanoo slammed into the ground hard enough to cause a literal ripple in the earth. But he wasn't mobile enough to avoid Madara's follow-up swing with his katana. The gold avatar braced, bringing up arms it knew couldn't withstand his attack in a vain attempt to defend itself. But withstand it did. Madara swore loudly as a shield of purple armor grew up in front of the arms, which his blade grated along without penetrating. "Hey dickwad!" shouted Sasuke Uchiha via Genjutsu. His arm was still gone, leg still broken, tongue still missing, and he was leaning on Naruto's shoulder for support. But he was conscious, and protected by the avatar. "Looks like your sword just doesn't cut it when it comes to an Uzumaki. Guess what they say about our clan size issues is true, huh? Die." Madara replied, eloquently. He swung his sword 6 times in quick succession, launching giant waves of lightning chakra at his target, then charging after them. Naruto blocked one in each arm, dodged preemptively left and just past Madara's downward sweep, turned back, and this time when Madara came in he angled his blade left, falling to a knee, such that the katana sliced through the golden avatar's leg, making it crash to the floor. He brought his sword up, preparing a downward stab to the head. A massive blast of white light launched up from its face, melting a giant hole through his Susanoo's hands and causing the blade to crash uselessly to one side. The avatar fired again, and Madara forced the giant mass of his Susanoo to dive roll to one side, avoiding the attack that swept upwards through the area he'd just occupied. Sweat began to run down his forehead. "Get your filthy hands off my boyfriend!" Hinata Hyuuga shouted, also now having been retrieved and brought within the avatar. She, too, looked ready to keel over at any moment, with massive organ failure and a shattered body. But her Tensiken was clearly working just fine. It was Naruto. He was the backbone of the team. He was the only reason either of them were still alive. So I just need to kill him. Shocker. Madara rolled back to his feet, manifesting an enormous blue great bow in his hands and drawing the string back. Senjutsu enhanced yin-yang chakra built up in his hands, warping gravity and bending lights travel around it. "Come on, take the bait, take it, take it. If you're anything like Hashirama, you won't be able to resist an epic final clash." They took it. As the Ashura avatar regenerated its leg and returned to its feet, the 3 members of Team 7 looked at each other and nodded. It raised its arms above its head and began marshalling a swirling mass of chakra. And just like that, Madara had won. In order to counter him, they would have to each contribute their own unique powers to the attack. But that was impossible. 2 ninja combining chakra equally to form a ninjutsu was difficult even for Jonin. 2 ninja combining chakra from 2 separate elements, especially ones that mixed explosively like fire and wind, was even harder. Only Kage could perform feats like that, or ninja who had spent their entire lives with each other. Combining a combination nature transformation with a dojutsu power? Even he and Hashirama working together had never been able to effectively combine Madara's Susanoo with Hashirama's larger wood-release structures, and he was not gloating when he claimed that they were 2 of the most synchronized ninja in history on the battlefield. Madara, of course, had never actually heard of Neji and Itachi. But these children desired to combine completely different chakra types, and do so equally between 3 people. Powers granted by God or not, it couldn't be done. They weren't even 18. Their technique would fail, or explode in their hands. And Madara's attack would punch through the avatar's head and kill all 3. In the end, he decided it was highly poetic. They would ultimately fail because their powers of teamwork, cooperation and trust simply weren't enough. "With this, I snuff out the will of fire," Madara cried out. "With this, I bring peace." Sage Art Hagoromo's arrow. He loosed his attack. The projectile tore across the ground between them, whipping up a tornado in its wake that carried all the wreckage of the battle along with it. One attack, to render all others meaningless. It was an extension of his own will. He watched the spinning chakra above the avatar's head. Watched as it grew larger, stronger, a throbbing mess of black and gold that grew until it resembled the boy's raisin shuriken, yet on an even greater scale. Watched the technique shudder as Sasuke channeled energy into his teammate's body and purple energy coagulated around it. Watched it shake violently as Hinata did the same from her side and white-blue streaks appeared in the spinning orb. He grinned when Naruto Uzumaki attempted finally to add his senjutsu. The technique shook one last time then split. The perfectly horizontal plane of rotation tore itself apart, shattering into dozens of different chaotic swirls. Madara chuckled to himself, closed his eyes, and waited for the end. He opened them again when he heard whoops. What he saw made his jaw drop. It was intact. It was a complete mess. Swirls within swirls, circles within circles, spikes and blades and power, and it was working. Each individual component flowed into and out of all the others. Naruto to Sasuke, Sasuke to Hinata, Hinata to Naruto, and the reverse. Each of the three alone, and then, in the core, all three combined. How? I don't understand. How can they know each other so well? How can they dare to reveal so much? How can they bear to face being known? Behold! Shouted Naruto, arm in arm with each of his teammates. The ultimate jutsu. The Tensei Rinne Inyan Susanoo Vishnu Six Paths Senjutsu Biju Raisin Shuriken. The avatar pulled its arms back, stomped both feet down onto the floor. Or, as we prefer to call it, Team 7 spoke in unison. The All-Star. The avatar heaved, and sent the attack flying through the air. Madara watched in horror as it shred his own jutsu like tissue paper. Then he widened out. When Madara reawoke, he was falling. Curiously, he didn't seem to be any pain. His Susanoo was gone, obviously. Everything around him just seemed to be glowing with light, as though he was falling through the greatest fireworks display the world had ever seen. Above him, Team 7 was falling too. Or more specifically, they were flying. Towards him. Each had a hand held out, as they drew ever closer to that one spot in his stomach beneath which the 10 tails writhed. He wanted to defend himself, yet couldn't seem to bring his body to move. That's it, then. I've lost. Time seemed to slow. It's a bitch, isn't it? Madara turned his head. Naruto was there, floating in the air next to him. Or rather, a copy of the boy was. The real one was still preparing to tear his chest open. A genjutsu, then. He could have dispelled it effortlessly. Didn't. What is? He replied. Losing. Naruto shrugged. Happens to you enough, you get used to it, but the sting never quite goes away. I wouldn't know. Madara replied, hoarsely. I've never lost a real fight before. Oh yeah? Asked a different voice. Madara looked, and saw Sasuke sat in the empty space with his legs crossed. What about Hashirama? Pain swelled in Madara's gut, along with rage. I killed Hashirama. I'm not saying you lost to him. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Although, you definitely did. A different voice appeared, along with Hinata. This one softer. You didn't lose to him. But you did lose him, didn't you? Madara closed his eyes, and sighed. Yes. Yes, I suppose I did. He reopened them, and looked between them. So what is this? Some last attempt to gloat? He focused on Naruto. Or is this one going to try and use his talk no jutsu to kin everyone? Just Naruto raised his hands frustratedly, then sighed himself. Can we stop calling it that, please? It's not a fucking jutsu. He smiled sadly at Madara. It's not mind control, it's not a superpower. It's just what happens when I try to understand someone when nobody else dares to try. There's so much you can do if you're just willing to extend that hand. Sometimes the hand gets bitten. Madara countered. Naruto shrugged. Sometimes. A smile broke out on his face. But I've always been a fast healer. We're here because you have time to cast a jutsu before we can kill you. Hinata replied, simply. No matter what you try to do with it, it won't be able to stop us from beating you. Though if you're feeling spiteful and clever enough, you could probably get one of us killed. But, we were thinking, maybe you could use that last jutsu on something more productive. Sasuke offered. Like, oh, I don't know Rinna Tensei. Madara laughed, hoarsely. Of course. You're still the Jubi Jinchuriki. Naruto pushed. Still the most powerful person alive. If you use it now, your range will be incredible. You might be able to bring back everyone who died in the war. You want me to use my last breath to apologize? Madara glared at him. No. Naruto admitted, frankly. You still think you're right, we clearly haven't changed that. But if you really want to minimize human suffering, this is the play you can choose to do it. Everyone's coming out of the infinite Tsukuyomi whether you like it or not, you've already lost. You just get to choose how many people died while you were doing it. Madara shook his head, vehemently. What kind of disrespect is that? Those people died for what they believed in, and you would simply undo it? Render their choices meaningless? You are committing exactly the evil you accuse me of. There was a short silence. My cousin's name is Neji. Hinata said, after a moment. Looked at Sasuke. And he has a big brother called Itachi. They were both partners. Both fought for what they believed in, and both died for it. They say there are two types of people. Sasuke nodded his head, speaking quietly. The ones that think I suffered, why shouldn't they, and the ones who think I suffered so that they don't have to. He looked up. I'm the latter, and they were too. They did so much to keep us safe, keep us happy. You think if they were given the opportunity to watch us enjoy what they worked for, they wouldn't take it? Madara looked down, and didn't say anything. Naruto paused, then walked up through the air, and crouched down next to Madara's head. Look. He said. The story's over now. It's written, conflict over, done and dusted. But now you get to decide the genre. That's not how writing books works, Madara groused. In one genre, everything's hopeful, but still gritty. Naruto continued. I go back and I bury Kakashi and Obito. I attend Killer Bee's funeral. Countless of us do something similar. In another, it's happy. Toothache-inducing levels of happy. The dead come back to life at the end. Everyone gets a happily ever after. And when the book comes out, the critics go, there were no stakes. None of the sacrifices meant anything. Shoddy work. It isn't fair. He leaned in, grinning. But you know what I say? We're ninja. Fuck fair. He spread his arms. Who gives a toss? I sure don't. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here. A bloodless war. Death and suffering are awful and horrible, and they oughtn't even exist, and you can stop some of that. He fell back onto his arse, sighing. Or don't. That's fine. But someday, maybe not soon, but someday? We are going to crack the rules of this world. We are going to find out what it is that makes all these people war with each other, and we're going to fix it. We're going to give them the freedom to choose, and they're going to choose the right thing. He smirked. And then one day, when we tear down the wall to the Pure Lands, and spread throughout the stars, and everyone who's ever died comes back and nobody ever has to do it again, you're going to get to have another conversation with Hashirama. That, I promise you, unconditional. What's up to you, right now? Is what you'll be able to tell him you did when you were asked to put human life before your own pride. Madara stared him down for a long moment. Then calmly said, Are you quite finished? Naruto stared back at him, and then nodded. He glanced up and shared a look with his three allies, and all three of them vanished. Time began to speed back up. Madara was falling again, and they were falling towards him. He put his hands together. So many options, they were right about one thing, though. He couldn't win. Looks like I'm going to be coming second, Hashirama. He thought to himself, much calmer than he thought he'd be. Heh. But I guess you're more than used to that happening, you short-fused bastard. Bao chica wow, when I do see you again, old friend? We really are going to need to have a good long talk. Samsara of heavenly life technique. He said, aloud. Fine, you smug bastards. Rinne Tensei. Epilogue. Team 7 looked absolutely ecstatic for almost a full second after Madara cast the jutsu. Then they realized they were all on the brink of death. Shit, Sasuke do the thing with the Nom Noms 8 King of Hell Go Go. The King of Hell appeared on the ground beneath the trio, and they essentially fell into its mouth. Right next to them, Madara simply hit the floor. He crashed into the stone, bouncing once, and then sighed. Idiots. I've been defeated by idiots. That stung, an arrow shot right into his pride, but he found he didn't have the energy to be angry about it. Too exhausted. Frankly, more than one life was far too long for him. Or maybe that was the life-draining jutsu talking, who knew? So are you healing them first and then bringing everyone back to life, or what? He called over to the big demonic head that was just sort of sat there in the destruction of the battlefield. The souls are released from your mouth, right? What are you doing now, chewing? The king looked at him. His vision was beginning to blur at that point, and it was always hard to tell about the Rinnegan, but Madara was sure that it rolled its eyes at him. He was proven correct a moment later though. The king's mouth opened, and the trio stumbled out of it. They looked absolutely exhausted, but otherwise were completely unharmed despite all three being crippled moments earlier. The Rinnegan really is bullshit. Then, the moment they were out of the way, the King of Hell tilted its head upwards. A beam of green light came erupting from its mouth, flying up into the air before splitting and raining down around them. It was, admittedly, very pretty. Most fell far in the distance, in one direction or another, but a few landed close enough for their landing zones to be seen by the four ninjas still standing. One touched the floor and grew, spreading into a human-esque silhouette of green, before the light shattered, revealing an intact, and most importantly, unharmed, ninja within it. He sat up, looked around in shock. Everyone heard him go the fuck? Oh, I know that guy. Madara mused. He was the guy with the glowing sword I fought while I was dicking on your whole army. He was fun. The next breath he tried to take came in as a wheeze, which quickly transformed into a cough. The Senjutsu chakra he was absorbing was trying desperately to keep him alive, but there was only so much it could do. Ugh. I suppose I should hurry this along then. I'm sure you obnoxious brats would find a way to do it without me, so I may as well save you the time. Madara put his hands together. I'll be honest, the massive speech to start the infinite Tsukuyomi was just me being dramatic. I just have to make the rat hand seal, and there was a subsonic boom. The roots of the world tree around them, the ones that had survived the carnage, at least, began to shudder, cracks appearing in the wood. There. Madara panted, sagging. Everyone should be freeing themselves from the dream world now. He smirked. Chance to test your theory, Uzumaki. Find out how many wish they could go back in. Shame I won't get to find out how many of the people you're resurrecting had new bodies constructed. Hinata spoke up. She has sagged against Naruto's left side, but was still giving Madara a piercing look. Everyone who was destroyed beyond repair. He told her. It's much more difficult to do it that way. Others could be put back together, and had their souls returned to their original bodies. Most who died to the Zetsu or Edos are still, he coughed again, mostly intact. But might still be in danger of death, Naruto sighed. The pain attack all over again. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. 100 or so clones, a frighteningly small number, which spoke volumes about his condition, appeared, spreading out in all directions to provide information and assistance where necessary to the recovering ninja. Is that it then? Sasuke panted, eyes closing. Are we done? Naruto frowned. Not yet. Oh, come on. Sasuke pointed vaguely towards one horizon, without looking up. Tinges of red could be seen spreading into the sky. See that? It's dawn. We've been fighting since yesterday morning. It's been a whole ass day, and we spent most of that perceiving time like 100 times faster than everyone else. I want to go to bed. Isn't the whining supposed to be my job? Naruto asked, as his friend slumped against him. Yeah, what he said, Uchiha. Snarked Hinata from Naruto's other side. She was smiling. Sawed off Hinata, you spent half the fight on the moon. And what do you think I was doing up there, weaving daisy chains? I had to talk to a god. Us too. Guys, chill, you can go sleep in a minute. Naruto lightly swatted both of them on the head. Out of the three, he was looking the most sprightly. Madara knew that was due to the six-path sage mode he still hadn't turned off. Natural energy was still constantly flowing into the boy. He must be practically on an adrenaline high right now. Heh. He's gonna crash when that drops for real though. Madara. Naruto focused on him. Bijou. Out. Right. Madara grimaced. I don't actually know how to go about doing that. Don't worry, I'll sort it. The Uzumaki eased his teammates off of himself, then walked up to Madara, putting one hand on his chest and closing his eyes. Yeah, they're all still there. That's what you get when you let chakra chunks have personalities for thousands of years. They don't want to coagulate into a big murder monster. I won't even have to use creation of all things to bust them out. You can do that? I'm not sure if there's anything I can't do right now. Naruto pointed out. Humph, fair. Madara looked up at him. You'd better take responsibility for this and corral them. Anyone they kill from now on is on you. Naruto just rolled his eyes. For the love of, they're not monsters. They're people. That's hardly an exhaustive threat assessment. I don't give a shit. I want my fox back. His frank admission brought a chuckle out of Madara. Ha! You sound just like Hashirama. Are you sure you're not secretly a direct descendant of his? That sounds like the plot of a really crap fanfiction. Point. Madara lay back. Do as you will, Naruto Uzumaki. The world is in your hands. Naruto smiled. Nope. He looked back at his teammates fondly, the two of whom had sunk into a sitting position against each other's backs. It's in ours. The hand on Madara's chest flashed with chakra, then tugged. Having a bijou extracted from your stomach really wasn't fun. Having the 10 tails extracted from your stomach was, to nobody's great surprise, even less fun. But hey, at least the light show was pretty. Naruto, specifically, began to glow a bright gold, and actually gasped as he stepped backwards. Kurama? He asked, hesitantly. Naruto. A voice echoed his call. Oh, thank the sage, I thought you were dead. I thought I was dead. I was about to whoa, Foxy, inside thoughts. Naruto cautioned. You keep going like that outside my head, you're gonna let the world know you have feelings. Oh, shit, can't have that. Naruto wandered off slightly, continuing to talk into midair and getting the attention of the rest of the bijou. Madara shook his head and turned back to the other two members of the team. As for you two, he coughed again. Now, all his powers were gone, leaving him an ordinary, rapidly dying man. I got you a present. Sasuke and Hinata exchanged concerned glances. Which means? Hinata asked, tentatively. Exactly what it sounds like. Madara smiled. I'm giving you some tools to help you be more rational. You were both pretty tricky during that fight. So you're definitely smart. Maybe the world isn't as doomed as I fear. In the distance, shouting could be heard. Madara saw the pair stiffen and shakily climb to their feet, looking behind him. From the voice, he knew what they were looking at. Their sensei, whatever his name, was running up towards them, with Obito beside him. But that wasn't the prize. I was what's Hashirama's word for it, OP. Madara told them, grabbing their attention again. Meaning I was able to reach a bit further back than just the war. He pointed a finger, behind Sasuke and Hinata, to the other two figures rapidly approaching from behind them. You told me you thought they'd prefer it if you undid the sacrifices they'd made. He saw both their eyes widen, and smirked. Time to put your predictions to the test, you little shits. His arm fell back to the floor, as Sasuke and Hinata spun in place to look behind them. A very exhausted Uchiha and Hyuga looked into the eyes of a very exhausted Uchiha and Hyuga. "Hinata?" whispered Neji. "Sasuke!" shouted Itachi. The two children charging into the arms of their family was the last thing Madara saw before the darkness overtook him. All in all, there were much worse scenes to die to. Somebody once told me the world was gonna roll me, I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. She was looking kinda dumb with her finger and her thumb in the shape of an L on her forehead. Sometime later it took Sasuke a long time to wake up. He drifted for an indeterminate amount of time, somewhere between lucid and unconscious, like a fly around. Oh screw it, metaphors were hard, he was tired. Eventually, though, discomfort won out over apathy. Everything in his body ached, from the soles of his feet to the palms of his hands, to his lungs and his brain. It was kinda like deciding that you need the toilet enough to make yourself get up, even though you're tired? Except with pain. So, grudgingly, he tried to open his eyes. That didn't exactly work. His eyes, quite reasonably, if he was being honest, decided that they had put in more than enough work recently and were deserving of a break. They tried to satisfy him with dreams of opening his eyes and doing stuff, but after his recent experiences with Jinjutsu, that just pissed him off. "Yeah, fuck off," he told them. "Come on, body, we can do this." Alley-oop. All he was able to do at that was wriggle himself around a bit in his bed, wherever that was. He couldn't even muster the strength to lift his own body weight. Why the hell are these covers so heavy? Why it took so long? A familiar voice filtered into his ears from somewhere nearby. "We had to find hold on, looks like your teammate's up." A pair of gentle hands pulled the sheets off of him, taking him by the shoulders. "Sasuke? You with us, hot stuff?" "Haku." Sasuke placed the voice, with some relief, though he still couldn't open his eyes. He sucked in a shaky breath through a dry throat. Water. "Here." Haku's arms helped him up into a sitting position, back against the bedrest, before holding what felt like a cup against his lips. He drank, gratefully, but ended up trying to take in too much and coughing half of it back up over himself. "Easy, tiger." Haku stressed, patting his back. "Take your time. You're more than entitled to hit the snooze button if you need to. And no more dreams," he said, recovering. Bit of a he coughed, aversion to those at the moment. Thematic reasons, you understand. He took another sip of the water, more carefully this time. "Heh. Glad to hear your SAS systems are fully operational, at least." Haku's hand came up to press against his forehead. "No temperature, your chakra reserves are low, but stable. Can you open your eyes for me?" "And no." Sasuke gulped, trying not to panic. They're not Sasuke." The voice came from somewhere to his left. Hinata's voice. "We're all here. It's okay." She chuckled weakly. "And it'd hardly be thematically appropriate if you couldn't open your eyes now, wouldn't it?" For some reason, which Sasuke would have called total BS on had he been more awake, that actually helped. He reached one arm up to rub at his eyes, then blearily opened both. Haku's annoyingly pretty face came into focus in front of him. "There you go." The Mizukage pat Sasuke's shoulder and moved back as he tried to take in his surroundings. He was in a tent. Medical tent, by the looks of things. Hinata was on a cot beside him, and she gave him a half-hearted wave, which he returned. What Sasuke looked around some more, saw Naruto lying on a cot to his right. The blonde was snoring, loudly. Full team accounted for, Sasuke allowed himself to actually relax. "How long were we out?" "You and Hinata have been asleep for." Haku fell back into a nearby chair with a sigh, turning to look at a clock in the corner of the room. 29 hours. She woke up just before you." Haku pointed at Naruto. "He has been asleep for 43 minutes. "What?" Haku laughed at their shocked expressions. "I thought we'd already established Naruto is not a person. He is a force of nature with hair and biceps." while you two passed out, like, normal people would after exhausting their chakra multiple times over in almost 10 consecutive encounters of exponentially increasing difficulty. Naruto kept going with his shadow clone army, healing and organizing people. It was 44 minutes ago that he went, "Need anything else?" And we went, "No, I think we're good now," and he went, "Oh, great," and immediately collapsed. Haku shook his head. "Moron, so fill us in." Hinata pressed, rolling her neck to work the kinks out. "What exactly happened?" Sasuke nodded in agreement, focusing. The last thing he remembered was slumping against Itachi, and his jaw dropped. "Oh, fuck, Itachi's alive." Haku shrugged. "You'll know more about that than me. Him, Neji, Killer Bee, Kakashi, Obito, everyone's back. Naruto said you got Madara to use the Rinne Tensei, right?" They nodded, and he continued. "Well, everyone was pretty out of it for a while. 90,000 ninja all pulling themselves out of these big pods on massive tree roots, or waking up in various states of injury with memories of being murdered. Chaos reigned for a solid 2 hours. Oh, and Itachi was still on death's door from his moon sickness, at least, that's what he's calling it. But we were able to get him to Tsunade, and he had that book Neji had written for him, so he's stable now. In some other tent nearby." Haku paused, during which time Sasuke shifted his legs out of bed and gently put them on the floor. That hurt, but he'd felt the Susanoo, so it was barely enough for him to notice. He slowly eased his full weight onto them, and Hinata, never to be outdone, started doing the same. Haku moved into range to help them, continuing, "Eventually, we were able to get the Kage together, and with liberal application of shadow clones, we were able to get the army into some semblance of order. Suna was the closest hidden village that was still intact, RIP Konoha's infrastructure, so we all headed there. That was when we realized that it wasn't as intact as we'd hoped." They gave him questioning glances, and he winced. The Tsukuyumi, it affected everyone. Everywhere. The roots of the Shinju tree have all broken down into so much mulch, but they left an absolute mess in their wake. And the more people, the more roots. Just about every global population center has been torn to pieces. All the property damage. All of it. All of the property has been damaged. The Allied Shinobi forces have quickly been transformed into the Allied Shinobi Salvation Forces, going around trying to organize the civilians and stop the inevitable crime wave that happened right after. He. ASS forces. Sasuke found his laughter wasn't as genuine as he'd have liked. He began trying to stretch out his complaining muscles as he said, "So everything's gone to shit, then? We're still not done?" "You are definitely done," Haku told him, firmly. "Firstly, because if you try to put any more stress on your recovering bodies, I'm going to knock you right back unconscious. Second, wouldn't you say you guys have done enough?" Sasuke and Hinata looked at each other. Smirked. "Yeah, right," Hinata replied. "Don't go talking like we're OAPs. We're 17. That's prime shonen protagonist age," Sasuke finished. "Plus we're only just getting used to all these cool new superpowers we've gotten. I'm not gonna say we're only just getting started, because that would be far too cliché for me," but he paused. "You can't think of an alternative, can you?" Hinata asked him. "Fuck off, I killed a god like 5 minutes ago. 30 hours ago, that's hardly an excuse." "Fine, 5 waking minutes ago, and it's not like you've come up with a better." They were interrupted by the tent flap being flung open so fast that the ends of it caught fire. "Sasuke!" shouted a voice, and Sasuke immediately let out an OOF. As a large form in black jumped through the air and tackled him onto the floor. Haku and Hinata both tensed, then relaxed as Sasuke shouted, "Itachi! Get off!" and squirmed ineffectually to try and get out of his older brother's grip. "Brother!" Itachi squealed in delight. "It is I! Back from the dead! And I bring snuggles. Crawl up your own ass and die." Haku facebombed. "Itachi! Glad to see your record of being the pushiest visitor possible to my patients is still intact, my apologies," called a different voice. In hindsight, I probably should have held off on telling him you were awake until you seemed ready. Walking at a much more sedate pace, Neji entered through the burning doorway and into the tent. While Itachi and Sasuke continued to grapple on the floor, Hinata stilled and looked up at him. "Cousin." She nodded. "Cousin." He replied. "Glad to see you're doing well. It seems like you've done the impossible. First rule of being a ninja." She shrugged. "The universe does not care what you believe to be impossible." He narrowed his eyes. "Where are you?" They lit up. "Oh, that's what I told you that one time. When I showed you, I didn't have the caged bird seal." "Oh. Well, yes." Hinata blinked. "You remembered that?" "Yes, of course I did. It was a dramatic moment. I assumed it was like a personal phrase of yours." "Ah." Neji snickered. "That no. I was ad-libbing, I just pulled the phrase out of my ass." "Why, did you think it was important? Are you serious?" Hinata glowered. "I've been using it at key moments for the last 4 years. It was a very cool thing to say." Itachi admitted, with his brother's arms around his neck. "Itachi!" Haku snapped. "Get off my patient or I'll sinbon both your asses." They laughed, and everyone relaxed a bit more. Neji sighed, scratching the back of his neck. "I was quite content with dying after a dramatic revelation of my true purpose." Itachi called it pulling a Darth Vader. He also called me a massive coward for trying to avoid my problems in such a manner. And now it seems like I'm going to actually have to have that long conversation with you where I actually explain things properly. "Oh, you are." Hinata nodded. "But it doesn't have to be a hostile one. I've had years to prepare for a confrontation with my nemesis. But it's been too long since I've been able to talk with my cousin." Everyone was quiet for a moment, except for the crackling of flames and the snores of Naruto. Then Itachi went "ah" and ruined it completely. Guys?" Haku held a hand up. "Not to interrupt, but do you mind if I start casting ice jutsu? Because Itachi set the door on fire and now the tent is burning down. Well, the years start coming and they don't stop coming, fed to the rules and I hit the ground running, didn't make sense not to live for fun, your brain gets smart but your head gets dumb. Some days later the Land of Iron was a hive of activity. Its position as a midpoint in the ninja world meant that it was central to cooperative repair efforts, and for days now there had been constant traffic in and out of the city with food, building supplies, money, and most importantly people. This was why, despite being as ravaged as the rest of the world by the roots of the God Tree, it was one of the quickest to repair and rebuild at least the basics of its structures. This was also why, despite the chaos, it was one of the first places to have a coffee shop up and running. "Sorry, it's so crowded." Haku apologized, walking back to the table and setting one drink down next to his date, and one for himself. "Somehow, this place seems to have a lot of traffic. Maybe because it's the only one of its kind in the city right now." Sai smiled, accepting his drink. "Thank you. At least the only one with indoor seating. And I don't mind, really. I like the bustle. Reminds me how many other people there are in the world." "Boo, poetic." Haku leaned back and blew on his drink. They were only fortunate that everyone else was so busy. The Mizukage drinking coffee with a ninja from Konoha might have drawn raised eyebrows on any other day. Here and now, they only got the occasional odd look. Maybe it was because Haku had left the hat in a sealing scroll, the diamond seal on his forehead the only big indicator of his identity. "Crazy, isn't it?" he said, looking out the window to see people walking around in the streets. "Something out of a joke. 2 massive armies fight a war, none of them die, and then the rest of the world, who hadn't even heard it was going on, wake up to find themselves crawling out of massive roots that grew straight through their living room. I heard they're thinking of updating the date-keeping system." Sai contributed. "Starting counting the years at 0 pit, post-infinite Tsukuyomi. That'd cause some upheaval." Haku snorted. "Still, now's as good a time as any for it." He sighed. The economy's gonna go to hell from this. I didn't expect you to pay the economy much mind. Sai commented. I run a village now. I have to care. Haku explained. Sure, I'll be fine, but if I make the wrong choices, then the entirety of Mist might fall apart without even needing to be attacked. Well, you fought Madara. Sai told him. Compared to that, this should be a walk in the park. At least Madara was something I could fight. Haku sipped his drink. Still. I've sicked Mei on it, and she's all for more political power, so she's lapping the responsibilities up. You trust her with more political power? Sai had a concerned look on his face. What if she tries to overthrow you again? Haku thought about it, eyes drifting. Well, she could, with enough village support. But she knows couldn't kill me. I'd kick her ass 5 ways to Sunday now my seal's fully operational. And to be honest, I don't really want the power of the position. I just don't want any clan massacres, like what happened to the rest of the Yuki. I don't want people to be murdering each other to graduate school. He sighed. I wanted to be Mizukage, because I don't want anyone else to end up like me, or Master Zabuza. Or you. He sat there for a few seconds, staring listlessly down into his cup, before he looked up and realized Sai was staring at him with a tilted head. Haku coughed and laughed nervously. Sorry, here we are going on and on about my life. What about you? What are your plans? Sai blinked, like he'd been taken off guard. Well. Continue being a ninja, I suppose. I don't exactly have any other marketable skills. Work for Konoha. Attempt to salvage some semblance of a personality. Sai. Haku exclaimed, in mock outrage. You know I am very fond of your personality. Well, yes. Sai admitted. I built it just for you. That brought Haku up short. From anyone else, it would have been a dry jab at the nature of being a ninja, the necessity of taking on new faces and personas to complete missions until it could be done like changing clothes. From Sai though, you mean that? Haku asked, hesitantly. My position is a fairly unique one. Sai said, choosing his words carefully. For the longest time, I was nobody. Which means that now, I get to choose who I want to be. And? Who do you want to be? Haku stared into his eyes. Sai stared back. Yours. He said, simply. Haku forgot how to breathe for 10 whole seconds. When his lungs started burning up, he rebooted and leaned back with a gasp and a face as red as the moon had been that one time. When he paused, thought gone. Let out another nervous laugh. There's He coughed. At the summit, tonight. Each of the Kage get to bring 2 reps with them. Mei's coming, but the last time I met Chojuro, I hit him in the back of the head with a chair. I know you're technically a leaf ninja, but would you like to accompany you? Sai tilted his head and smiled brightly. I'd love to. So much to do, so much to see, so what's wrong with taking the back streets? You'll never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. The fire daimyo was not a happy man. In this situation, it would be very hard for any man to be happy, and as Izuku Ikkyu stepped out of his carriage into half a foot of snow, rising above and dribbling into his boots, his mood was cemented for the rest of the day. It only soured further when he was met by 2 masked members of Konoha's Umbu. Sir. One of them addressed him, with a title notably lower than what they would use for their Kage. The Lady Hokage awaits you inside. Please, follow us. Tsunade wreaks havoc across my country, and she does not even deign to meet me when I arrive? Izuku sneered. I trust she is using the time to prepare? She had best have an excellent explanation for all this. I couldn't say, sir. Said the other Umbu, in an infuriatingly emotionless tone, before repeating, please, follow us. Humph, very well. He shivered, as a trickle of water soaked down into his socks, and followed them inside the recently constructed building. There were times, when was feeling whimsical, that the daimyo belatedly wished for Hiruzen back. When Ikkyu had come into power, Hiruzen Sarutobi had been the long-established Hokage of Konoha. The professor had treated the daimyo with the respect he deserved, keeping him in the know, meeting him for dinner, explaining situations and making requests rather than demands. There had been peace and prosperity, and Ikkyu had been quite content with that. And then he had died, and Tsunade had come to power. And in less than 4 years, there had been a war, the complete obliteration of Konoha, a discovery of a genjutsu placed on damn near everyone important, and then this. Whatever in Kami's name an infinite Tsukuyomi was. While he had been caught in the dream the same as everyone else, including his own guards, so could at least understand roughly what had happened, his contacts in Konoha had been frustratingly tight-lipped. Still gathering information, they had said. Covering their own asses, more like. Well, fixing that was what this whole event was about. All 5 Kage were present, as were the daimyos of the 5 nations, and all other relevant personnel. They were here to negotiate what had happened, who was at fault, and who was going to pay for all this. That thought was disappointingly not accompanied by a dramatic roll of thunder. It was, however, accompanied by an orange figure practically crashing into him. Ikkyu stumbled back a step as a blonde teenager sprinted through a corridor that intersected his path at AT, going oop. And briefly grabbing a fistful of the daimyo's robes to steady himself before continuing on his run through the corridor. The grapple, completely accidentally, shook loose the snow that had fallen from the sky and accumulated on Ikkyu's collar, resulting in a flash of cold as some of the snow fell down the back of his neck and started to melt between his shoulder blades. One of his eyebrows twitched. "You there?" He snapped at the blonde menace. "What do you think you're doing? And you tell Konohamaru that if I catch him pretending he invented my sexy jutsu again, then he can The blonde turned around to look at Ikkyu. "Y'all say something?" The 2 Umbu beside the fire daimyo suddenly went very still, which Ikkyu didn't notice as he gave one of his best glares at the boy, briefly glancing up at his headband and recognizing him as a leaf shinobi. "What is your rank, ninja?" "HM? Oh, Chunin." The blonde's expression went strange, as he looked down at himself and quietly said, "Oh my god, I'm still a Chunin, how in the 7 hells am I still a Chunin, a Chunin?" Ikkyu scoffed, as he mentally designated the boy as unimportant enough to make an example of. "Then surely you should be possessed of the great shinobi reflexes that would prevent you bowling into me like some drunkard in the street?" One of the Umbu put their hand on his shoulder. "Sir, please, the Hokage is waiting." "Oh, shit, my bad man." The blonde grinned stupidly, scratching the back of his head. "I can go faster, but I've been told I gotta stay slow enough for everyone to keep track of what I'm saying. And they said I couldn't fly 'cause it would freak people out." "Fly? What sort of stupid civilian does he think I am? Ninja can't fly." Ikkyu brushed the Umbu's hand off his shoulder, replying, "You're bad? Do you have any idea who I am?" The boy blinked. "Not in the slightest, no." Wait. He leaned in, even though he was at least 3 meters away. "Are you that one guy Conan wanted me to meet?" "Wait, no, that was probably Jiraiya now that I think about it." "Oh, that's why she wanted me to go to Rain. I am your daimyo." Ikkyu screeched. "Please, sir, I assure you he isn't worth your time." One of the Umbu tried again. The boy nodded, slowly, clearly still not getting it. "Oh, no, I know you. Dude, your wife's cat is an absolute bastard." Ikkyu's fists clenched. "Arrest him." "Sir?" one Umbu asked. "Arrest him." He spat. "The daimyo has the authority to demand the arrest of any ninja of Chunin rank or below without consultation with his Kage, unless you had both forgotten that?" "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding." The other Umbu coughed. He pointed at the blonde, who stood there with a perfectly innocent look on his face. "That's Naruto Uzumaki." Ikkyu frowned, quickly placing the name. "This is the Nine-Tails host? And you let him wander around?" He scoffed. "Our Jinchuriki should possess more control, not less. I will not be made to refrain from righteous punishment for fear of his beast going on a rampage." "Hey!" Naruto said, sounding affronted. Kurama doesn't go on rampages unless he's being mind-controlled. This was established like 4 arcs ago. Then he paused and looked down. Okay, he says he would rampage on you specifically, but that's only because you're being a self-righteous prick. That's his words, not mine. Arrest him, Ikkyu said, quietly. Sir, said one Anbu, I'd advise that you reconsider. Oh, would you? The daimyo rounded on the masked ninja. Your place is not to advise, it is to obey. Or have you forgotten that as well? He noticed that they were beginning to attract stares from other passers-by, but screw it, this was as good a time as any. I am your daimyo, he snarled. The supreme leader of Fire Country. Your village, and every ninja within it, is but one cog in a machine that I control. Without me, you have no funding, no resources, no land, and no authority, and no fancy magic or fighting skills is enough to change that. He pointed an accusing finger at Naruto. So when I tell you to arrest an unruly member of your own armed forces, you will arrest him. The Anbu looked at each other. I'm afraid that's impossible, sir. One of them said, after a pause. And why on earth is that? Ikkyu demanded. The pair audibly sighed. Then they both reached up to remove their masks, revealing Ikkyu stumbled back a few steps, as 2 more Naruto smiled sheepishly at him. Sorry. We're understaffed. One said, guiltily. All the real Anbu are off doing actually important stuff, but that left us without anyone to escort you, so Grandma Tsunade asked Naruto Prime to set clones on it. The other explained. Or, well, she asked another clone to set clones on it. It pointed back to the first Naruto, who waved cheerfully. He's the original. I'm a clone of a clone of a clone of him. What the Ikkyu had no idea what to say. The assortment of ninja watching the show, however, seemed to know just fine how to react, and that was to start laughing. There were stomping footsteps from one of the corridors, and then the voice, "Oh, Izuku. You're here." Perfect Tsunade Senju walked up with a scowl on her face. Daimyo, with respect, quit fucking with my Jinchuriki. Naruto, I specifically told you to not make trouble until I asked you to. He started it. Naruto shouted, petulantly. Tsunade, what the hell is going on here? Ikkyu snarled at her. Your pet fox has the audacity to buddy. Tsunade put one hand on his shoulder, glaring down at him. Let's be clear here. Naruto could have ripped your balls off without provocation, and I'd still side with him on this. Why? Ikkyu asked, hearing his own voice go up by a good octave and a half. 1. Because you're a massive pain in the ass. Tsunade told him. You're like Danzo, but without any of the brains or competence. 2. Because he's the guy whose team just saved the whole goddamn planet. Because he's probably the most powerful being in this dimension at the moment, and if he wanted to he could kill you, me, and everyone else in the city without breaking a sweat. And because even without all that, he's worth 1,000 of you. She let go of him with a shove and sighed. Kami, I need more sake Tweedledum and D, take our esteemed daimyo into the conference room. Yes, ma'am. The clones saluted her, and each took one of Ikkyu's arms. And as for you, Tsunade turned on the original Naruto, who let out a quiet eep of fear. The fire daimyo watched as Tsunade began to verbally tear the boy to shreds, and just allowed himself to be escorted out of the room. 0000000000000000000000000000000. The end.
Thank you for your views, likes, subscriptions, and overall support of my ongoing efforts to bring great content to all of you. Check out my Patreon for more mature fanfiction. The link is in the description and like everywhere on my channel.